Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin. Our guest today is a well-rounded horseman. He's a traveling Colt starter and clinician. He works with horses from ranch horse versatility to mounted shooting and even to eventers and dressage. Mr. Mark Lyon, how are you doing today, sir?
Oh man, I'm doing really good. Enjoying another beautiful day here in Texas.
Well, I appreciate you taking a little time out of your Colt starting that you got going on this week to have a chat with us. So where are you at in Texas, and what are you kind of doing this week? I know your deal changes every week. So what do you got going on now?
Yeah, there's no typical day in life. I guess of probably a lot of horsemen, but I'm in Houston, Texas, just outside of Houston at the Terry Ranch. I started a lot of colts for them. They've got a ranch and they're actually getting ready to do a dispersal sale. So they're kind of getting ready to retire. And so they're selling a bunch of the horses. So I've got about 12 or 15 that are going to go to the Shawnee sale in a couple of weeks. So, and they're all ones I've started, or most of them I've started before. There's 3 or 4 that are young ones that I'm kind of getting ready to go. And yeah, just getting them all kind of polished up a little bit, working on some cow work and stuff, and just general riding around and getting them ready.
Okay. And they're going to Shawnee, Oklahoma to the sale
Yeah,
up there? Is that right?
yeah. The 30th end of the month there, they've got a sale, and I've taken probably 20 or 30 of them up there at different times. There's quite a few. It's a pretty good sale, and so we've taken I guess normally we take about 6 to 10 every year up there.
Are you going to the sale with these horses? You going to ride them through the
Yeah.
ring and all? Okay.
Yep, yeah. I'll ride them through the ring. The ones that are riding. I think there's a few weanlings and long yearlings that won't be riding, but the rest of them that have been started and riding around, I'll ride them through the sale and demo them.
I used to do a whole lot of that, and I really haven't in quite a few years now. But one of the things I have always mystified me a little bit, like in cutting. I mean, one of our big events for the 2-year-old men is the futurity sales and all that stuff. But if I private treaty sell a horse for somebody, I get a commission. If I take a day out of my life and drive their horse to a sale and ride it through the ring and do all that exhibition and talk to people, all that, then I don't get a commission at all. We get paid the least amount for doing the most amount of the work. Somehow we didn't negotiate that one right when we started the horse trainer contracts. But
anyway. Yeah.
Well, Mark, we try to start everybody off with the lightning round questions, and these are for points. So you want to be sure and do your A game here.
Okay. All right. I'm ready.
Got prizes in the end and all.
Oh, verdict.
If you were a Jedi, what % chance would there be that you would use the Force inappropriately?
99% chance.
An honest man. I like it. Morning or evening?
Evening. Yeah, really? I like the mornings for sipping coffee and watching the sun come up, but yeah, I'm way more in the evening. I'm way more of an evening person.
Okay. Are you a don't talk to me until my second cup of coffee kind of a guy, or?
Yeah, I actually wake up pretty happy in the morning without my coffee, but it's definitely something that's my coffee maker goes off before I get up. So when I get up, my coffee, it disheartens me when I get up and I have forgotten to make coffee the night before, because coffee is something that you need it in order to make it, and so you're kind of for me anyway. I kind of like having it done, but I'm normally pretty happy in the morning, but I do like evenings better.
Bay or sorrel?
Oh, I'm gonna say bay. One of the best horses I had was bay, although I have all sorrel at the moment. I have 3 sorrel horses that are mine, so I have all sorrels at the moment. But one of my favorite horses was a bay, so I'm gonna say bay.
Okay, but I say this just about every time, and we've been on a real. I think every guest for the last 7 guests or something has been bay. I thought when I put that question in there, it'd be like 50-50.
Right?
Man, it's like 9 out of 10 people want bay horses. I had no idea.
Yeah,
So anyway,
yeah,
dogs or cats?
definitely dogs.
Any particular breed?
I've got a Catahoula black-mouthed cur cross at the moment, and my last dog was a Catahoula blue heeler cross. So yeah, I like the Catahoulas. They're pretty good dogs.
You like dogs that are untrainable, I see.
Well, a friend of mine's got a Belgian Malinois, so it's like,
Oh,
and we always kind of, and another buddy of mine's got a couple of border collies, and he's like, we're not sure which one's the most untrainable. It's just, it's all of them are kind of tough. I guess I like a challenge, I guess.
there you go. That's the state
Yeah,
dog of Louisiana. I've been
it
around
is.
a pile of those
Yeah,
things. Yes, sir.
yeah,
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are
I like it.
you a thick crust or a thin crust guy or what?
I like a thin crust just because I didn't come to pizza for the bread. I came for the toppings, so I like a thin
Oh,
crust.
and you are living in your horse trailer a lot of times because of life on the road. Are you a cook at all?
Oh yes, yeah. The one of the biggest things I like about my trailer is it's got a pretty good sized kitchen in it, so it's got I like making bread and some rolls and stuff like that in the oven and cooking dinner in the evening. So it saves me a lot of money from eating out and a little bit healthier. So yeah, I like cooking.
I'm not an evening person. I'm a morning person, but like on the road like that, I would need a black iron pot in the evening, a little fire, a little that 2 hours of cooking a heck of a meal for myself would maybe be my most favorite looked forward to part of the whole day.
Yeah.
If there are good essential oils, do you think it's fair to say that there must also be evil essential oils?
Oh, I think 100%. Yeah. One of my most favorite oils is an evil essential oil,
What is that?
chloroform.
Chloroform? I didn't even know that was an oil. All
I
right.
don't think it is. It's a pretty funny. We have a couple buddies. We joke around a little bit of it.
I
We
was
were actually talking about that, and I said, oh, do you think there's an evil? Is there a essential oil for quiet? That's what it was. It was an essential oil for peace and quiet. I said, yeah, it's chloroform, and they thought it was pretty funny.
make a mental note to have the state troopers check the back of Mark's trailer next time he's heading down the road. do,
Oh,
do you have a horse industry related pet peeve?
oh boy, I would say I think all of us have one or the other. With me, there's a bunch of them. My pet peeve would be, I guess there are two of my two biggest pet peeves are tying the halter knot on the halter incorrectly, tying it with an overhand knot instead of a sheet bend, and then leading the horse by the snap or by the underneath the chin by the halter. I'd say
Got
those
him
are my two.
grabbed right up there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Tell me
yeah,
you're scared of your horse without telling me you're scared
yes,
of your
yeah,
horse.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Do you have a favorite beverage?
Dr. Pepper.
You'd get along with my wife. Whenever I first met her, I swear her blood was 90% Dr. Pepper, and now it's
Yeah.
Diet Dr. Pepper. But yeah,
Oh yeah, I got my little cup of Dr. Pepper here. I'm ready.
if you had to choose between dealing with a horse that was completely feral or very, very spoiled, which way would you go?
Oh man, I would say spoiled. I'd prefer the spoiled one. Yeah, it's a tough decision, but I've had I guess I've had quite a bit of experience with both, and I found that the spoiled ones come along a little faster than the feral ones. The feral ones they're scared of you, so it takes them a little bit longer to get quiet and realize you're not gonna hurt them. And the spoiled ones, it doesn't take them very long to figure out that they shouldn't push on you and run over the top of you, and they'll give you kind of a little bit of give you some space and
I'm
go
going to
faster.
ask you a side question here since you
Yeah.
are kind of a fellow Colt starter problem horse kind of a guy. Would
hmm
you say that people underestimate just how dangerous a spoiled horse could be?
Oh yeah.
That,
Yeah,
that
I think it's like, yeah, it's like a dog, I mean, they think of it like like a spoiled dog, or, just like a dog that's, very friendly. I tell them there's a big difference between tame and trained. And the problem is they'll see that horse that's tame, and then it's like, yeah, he's quiet, but he's also not doing anything that he doesn't want to do. And then you ask him to do something that maybe he doesn't want to, and they will have a fit. So yeah, they can definitely, yeah,
that's one of
definitely
the
come
things.
apart.
Some of the more dangerous horses I've dealt with have been in that spoiled. They have absolutely no fear of you whatsoever, and it seems to be vogue nowadays for people to have that thought that we want that horse to have, no fear of us whatsoever. And yeah, there might be a little bit of that that's helpful or
Yeah, yeah. I tell people I don't want them afraid of me, but I want them to have a healthy respect for me. And, like I grew up, I loved my parents, my parents loved me, but there was a couple times, I can remember that I said something inappropriate, and my dad came around the corner and grabbed me by the front of the collar and said, "You'll not talk to your mother that way." And I was like, "Oh yeah," yeah, started stuttering, and yeah, I was a little bit scared right there in that moment. And like I say, you want a little healthy respect. You don't want them, you don't want them afraid, and trying to find that balance between them thinking you're just another friend and thinking that being too afraid of you is the spot that I think we're all hunting.
yeah, there can be balance for sure
Yeah.
with something like that. Yes, sir. Would you tell us something unexpected about you?
Unexpected. I've competed in couples dance,
In what?
couples dancing. I used to teach and competitively compete in couples dance, Western dance, like two
Okay.
step, cha cha, waltz.
Okay. All right. I got you. What was your favorite sort of dancing to do there?
West Coast swing. West Coast swing is my favorite couple dance to do. Yeah.
Some asleep at the wheel and that sort of stuff out there?
Yeah, West Coast swing is a little bit different than like the East Coast and jitterbug style, but it's a pretty fun. It's pretty advanced. It's tough for the it's tough for the girls to follow. It's a little bit more technically quick dance, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of stuff you can do with it, and that's probably my favorite. But yeah, two step, double two, waltz, cha cha, any of that stuff is pretty fun. I enjoy. I used to do quite a bit of it. I don't do very much of it anymore, but I actually use it a little bit in my analogies in horses, because when you're when you're riding your horse, it should be very similar. You're the leader, they're the follower, and it should look like a dance. It shouldn't look, as I tell people, when you watch somebody out on the floor, there's the couples that make it look very smooth, and then there's the ones that look more like WW wrestlers than they do dancers. And the same thing happens in horses. Sometimes we make it look way more like a wrestling match than we do a dance, and our goal is to make it look like a stuff flowing dance. The horses realizing and knows what cues are coming, and how to respond to them, and we are cueing them at the right time so that the foot we want to move is in the air. And so there's a lot of analogies that I draw from that, and it's always fun to. One of my favorite things is most of the girls kind of complain about the lack of guys that know how to dance compared to the girls that want to dance. And I say, well, yeah, that's true. Let's find out why. So then we have them, just have them go around and pick up the foot. They like, let's say, I say go to the left, and then pick that rein up and move that foot to the left as it's coming up, or even just tell me when that left foot is coming up, because that's when you need to move it. And so they'll try for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then I'll try the right foot. And pretty soon after an hour or two, I go, man, you guys aren't very good at figuring out where the feet are, and so and I say, well, that's why there's not very many guys that are good at dancing, is because it takes, we first of all have to figure out how to dance ourselves, and then we got to figure out where the girls' feet are, and then we have to time up the lead in in the same timing that the girls are walking. And so, yeah, it takes some advancement. It's just not like, just grabbing a girl and going out there and flinging her around the floor. So they once they experience how difficult it is to be technically correct with it, they kind of have a little bit more grace for the guys that maybe don't know how to dance very well. So I kind of like it.
And while the guy is in that awkward, doesn't know what he's doing
Yes,
stage, he's being
yes,
awkward with the girl that he
yes,
probably, yeah. So you
yes.
can certainly see how avoiding that might be the way to go. I resemble that
Yeah,
remark.
yeah.
If you could choose any superpower, what superpower would you choose?
Hmm. Hmm. I would have to say time travel.
How would you use that?
Oh, I'd like to go back in time and talk to, some trainers and make just lots of people. Just kind of go back and see what they were thinking and yeah, I think it'd be kind of cool to go back, um, in the pioneer days, and then also maybe in ancient Rome days and talk to different people and yeah, I think that'd be kind of a cool superpower.
What about young Mark? Like we all have that horse or
Mhm.
five in our past that we're thinking, man, I really didn't do that horse right. If I knew then what I
Yeah.
know now, would you go right some of those wrongs or
Oh yeah, definitely be nice to be able to go back and tell your younger self, hey, dummy, don't do that. This is yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine. We talked about horses and we were talking about the tough horses and I said, the problem with the difficult horses is the difficult horses make you the trainer you are today, and you kind of, the easy horses don't teach you how to have the higher skills. Anybody can train the. When I first started training reiners and cow horses, man, they stop and turn and track a cow already. Like it's like training a border collie to go chase sheep. It's like you don't have to drive very hard. Like turn him loose and he kind of does it on his own. So it was like, hey man, I'm a good trainer. Look, I got this one to slide, and it's like, no, that one already wanted to slide. You just happen to be sitting on it when you kind of just barely fixed it up. So I think that the tougher horses, they help you. And then you get to the point where now people, oh, there was some lady called me the other day and she said, hey, I think you're the only person in the world that can help this horse. And I said, well, I'm probably not gonna. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, look, if I'm one of a very few people that's good enough to fix him, like I don't really like that's not some I've done all those. I don't need any more practice. I'm not out to prove anything. And so I think, and I did find I know a couple of people that I kind of intern with and that intern for me and I've kind of coached them a little bit and they're looking for things to kind of make themselves better. And so I found one of them and he's always looking for a challenge and wants to, you know, be better and so anyway, I found him somebody that could help him out. But yeah, after a while, those horses, they make us better, and then when we get pretty good, then we're like, nope, not interested in
the risk? Yeah,
risking my life. Yeah, risking my life to make. I'm pretty comfortable with where I am. I don't really, you
got
know.
the scars and the stories already, but
Yes,
thank you.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Thoughts or feelings?
I would say I would say feelings because I tend to operate in the thought realm naturally, and so I think if I was to make myself a little bit more balanced, I would I would I would try, and I that's something I try to do is use more empathy and more feelings in particularly my interactions with people, and so that's like I say, I tend to be more thought based, logic based, but so I think if I naturally want to do that, so I would probably tend to be more feeling based if I was trying to balance myself out.
Are you decisive or indecisive?
Fairly decisive. I think on a range, I'm more decisive. More it doesn't take me very long to weigh the pros and cons and then come to a decision.
I'm starting to wonder if maybe I need to change that question around. I'm starting to think that it has to deal more with acceptance of consequences because I think decisive people are just, I'm going to make the decision and then whatever happens after that, I'll deal with. And indecisive
Yeah,
people are fearful of what the consequences, I think that has more to do with it than the
yeah,
decision itself. But
yeah.
what is the best smell in the barn?
Lexol,
Okay.
yeah, leather conditioner.
Uh-huh. You're the first to say that, but that is a pretty good one. I would say absorbing too would be kind of there
Oh,
for
yeah.
me with that. Yeah, never thought about it.
What's the worst one? What's the worst smell in the barn?
For me, cat pee. Yep, that's no.
Yeah.
My wife's got a whole bunch of barn cats, and if I
Yeah.
walk into a room and a cat's been there and that hit like that's a. I think it affects me more than other people, but that's one of the worst smells on the planet as far as I'm concerned. So,
Yep. I was talking to we were talking about best and worst smells, and I came up with DMSO. I said that's got to be the worst smell ever. Is DMSO.
okay,
Don't
so
like it.
I don't really smell it. I will get the garlic
It's,
taste in my mouth
yeah,
from it,
yeah,
but yeah,
yeah. That deal. When you go through the barn and you're like, oh man, look, yeah, don't like it.
do you have a favorite book or movie?
There's so many of them. I mean the one that comes to the movie favorite movie that comes to mind is The Patriot.
Mel Gibson?
That's the yep, yep. And favorite book, I'd have to say the Bible. I mean that's the book I read the most. It's probably not the most entertaining. I read a lot of books, but the book I read the most probably
The Bible.
the Bible.
Sweet, salty, or spicy?
Sweet.
Do you have a favorite dinosaur or deep sea creature?
Dinosaur or deep sea creature? Mm,
Not really.
no.
Okay, fair enough. Have you ever had a UFO encounter?
No.
No. That's another one of
No.
those. I was like 50-50 of people
Yeah.
saying they had, I even had a
Yeah.
Bigfoot Yeti encounter. And then like the last 6, 7 guests, nothing.
Yeah.
So
No.
I don't know what's up with that. But anyway, well, Mark, I am tabulating your score here, and you have got 1,396 points, just shy of 1,400. But that is our all-time high score for this game.
Wow.
So
Awesome.
that entitles you to either an awkward silence or a genuine compliment, your choice.
Oh, I'll take the genuine compliment.
Well, I had something planned here for this, but I now that I'm kind of seeing you face to face, the mustache is magnificent, man. I don't often compliment another man on his appearance and all, but I've been growing mine out a little bit
Yeah.
too. And I'm like, you got some serious time and dedication wrapped up in that sucker.
Yeah.
It's impressive. I really have to say. So
Thanks.
I hope you don't think ill of me for going on the
No,
shallow end,
no,
but I mean I'm
no.
like that's some commitment you got going on right there.
It,
I like.
does it does take a little commitment, but it's fun. It's the I like kind of the historic old timey kind of looking stuff, and so that kind of is that same vein.
I saw a guy last year. He was fairly young too. He looked like he was in his 20s and had a similar mustache, and it broke off in the wintertime. Have you
Oh
ever
yeah,
seen
yep,
somebody that? Okay,
yeah, yeah. If you're especially up in, I was raised in Nebraska, and so you kind of had to be careful. If you had it like waxed up and it got a lot of moisture in it and then froze, when it would run, something would run into it and it would break. That it would break right there at that ice, and it would shear the hair off. Yep.
okay. I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if that was a joke post or something, but you've
No,
given
no,
that credence now.
yeah,
Oh man,
yeah.
That's got to be heartbreaking when you're like, man, that's 8 months worth of mustache that just, and now I got to
Yeah,
cut the other side on purpose. Huh?
yeah, yeah. I've never had it break very close. I've had it break more out on the tip, the where it gets thinner. The normally at the thicker part, it'll hang in there and it's hard to break. But the ends, if they're got a lot, you'll be breathing, or you'll have a lot of that condensation from your breath condensate on there and make a little bit of an icicle on the end, and then it'll break off. And I've had the ends break off before in the
Okay.
cold weather.
What kind of mustache wax do you like? You have a hard preference there, or not
Yeah,
really?
I like yeah, I like Clubman's mustache wax is what I generally use. Got a couple other brands that I like that aren't water soluble. So if I know it's going to be wet when I go to Louisiana and Florida and Alabama and if I'm going to be down there, the moisture will wreck. The Clubman's is water soluble, so it'll just come apart. So
So
I've
that's the
got
only
some.
one. Yeah. That's the only one I can find around here without like ordering
Yeah,
off of the internet. And I haven't liked
yeah,
it, but that's probably
yeah.
why I didn't know that about it. So if I were in
Oh yeah,
because
yeah.
it
It's
just,
water soluble, so you can wash it out in the shower or whatever. The other ones, a lot of times you'll have to warm them up because there's like you can make your own too with beeswax and petroleum jelly, and the percentage more petroleum jelly is a little bit softer and not as stiff, and then the more wax, of course, the more stiff it is. But you'll normally have to warm those up in hot water and get them pretty hot, and then kind of stick it in there, and then as it cools off, you'll form it. But they won't wash out. They're really good for muggy climates, but it also it's also hard to get off in the.
I have been, I don't have mine done here, but you can see it's maybe an inch out
Yeah,
past the sides or
yeah,
so. But it's definitely to the length where if I don't have wax in it, I can't hardly eat because it'll want, you'll get it sucked in. So
yeah,
I've been
yeah,
tempted to cut her back here. But anyway, learn something new. I'll try a genuine wax before I go to snipping her down to where I had it
yeah,
before. But, well, down to the real questions. Would you kind of give
yeah.
us a 30,000 foot view of what Mark Lyon horsemanship is all about? What's your place in the industry and what it is that you do?
I like just using my skills and talents to help other people improve their relationship with their horse. And I would say it's probably a little bit more helping the person at the moment. It used to be way more. I helped work on the horses way more than I did the people. And it's starting as I get a little older and longer in the tooth and creaks and crackles when you get out of bed in the morning. I've started working with the people a little bit more than the horses. But yeah, just kind of helping each relationship, see if I can help it be a little better, help them to understand where the horse is coming from, and help the horse understand where the person's coming from, and get a little bit better relationship together. So yeah, that's kind of the overall goal.
Okay. Would you tell us a little bit about your start into this deal and kind of how the progression of where you began to where you are now?
Yeah, so I grew up in Nebraska and grew up in town, so I always kind of enjoyed horses, and I think most young men want to be a cowboy when they're growing up. We just never had the facility or money to have a horse, to have horses and board them and stuff like that. So just never did that. And then made some friends with some guys that had some ranches and had horses, and so I started going out to their place and riding some of their horses, and then I kind of liked it and had a little bit of natural ability, I guess. So started just working, getting a little bit better. When I first, I guess when you first start out, of course you want to get better and you're willing to take advice from anybody that's better than you, and even if they're only slightly better than you. And so I got a lot of information when I was first starting that was not very probably the best information to get, and so as I got a little better and started working on it, then I finally ran into a few people that they were pretty good. They were pretty good horsemen, and of course they would when I was growing up, I was homeschooled, and so my parents, one thing I really like about my upbringing was my parents taught me how to think. They said, they were like, "Hey, does that make sense? Does that make sense?" And so when I started working with horses, I would go, I mean, you're telling me this, but it doesn't make sense to me. And so I would question it a little bit, and I didn't really didn't know why. And then like I say, got to learning from some people that actually what they said made a lot of logical sense to me. And so I was like, oh man, this is better. And of course the results. I tell people, if you can do a lot of things with horses and you can be wrong and it'll still work. Just because it doesn't work, I mean, just because it works doesn't mean it's the best. I mean, till somebody was like, "Well, it works," and I said, "Yeah, so does spur stops on horses." I mean, the Western pleasure industry has been using spur stops on horses, and it doesn't. I mean, you tell anybody that owns a horse, "Hey, we're gonna poke the horse with a spur, and he should stop." Like, yeah, that's probably not the most conducive to a working relationship, but it does work in certain situations, and so yeah, I started learning from what guys that had a lot of just common sense with horses, and so learned a little bit from them. And then I just started really really trying to get better and better with them, and yeah, eventually got where people were paying me to ride their horses, and eventually it kind of grew into a full-time business, and yeah,
So,
led me on the dream.
so would you say that like on your personal horses, these three sorrels that you're hauling right now, are you more of like a bridle horse sort of a guy? What's your approach on? I know you do a lot of things professionally there, but on the this one's
Yep.
mine and I can do whatever I want with it. What's your approach there?
Yeah, I like the vaquero traditional hackamore kind of stuff, bridle horse method. I kind of like that. It's something that appeals to me. And so on my personal horses, that's what I that's what I kind of go for. I tell people the for me the bridle horse, getting the horse straight up in the bridle is kind of like getting the master's degree from college. And every horse I get isn't gonna make that. Like some of them just aren't smart enough. Maybe I just don't have enough time. Maybe they're just not athletic enough. So, it's kind of like I think every parent's dream is to get their kid to get a master's degree from college, but some of us just aren't gonna. That's not gonna be in the cards. So we kind of go with whatever we can do to kind of get that horse to the best we can. And so every horse I get, I try to do a little bit better job than I did on the last one, and just take him as far as I can with my skills. And it's been fun to watch my training progress. The first few horses I did, I was pretty proud of them. And then by the time I sold them, I was like, man, I want to get rid of this thing because it reminds me of all the mistakes I made. I can do a better job on the next one. And so somebody else was, that was to me, it wasn't the best horse I had ridden anymore. It was, I had made some mistakes that were going to take maybe we could never train out of them. And somebody else's, that was the best horse they'd ever ridden. And they were like, man, horse is amazing. And I was like, yeah, yeah, he's okay. And so you you get a chance to try that again and make less mistakes the next time, and then somebody else gets a chance to have a horse that's the best horse they've ever ridden, and so then it's a winner. It's a win-win deal. You get a chance to take another horse on and try to improve your skills and the horse's ability, and somebody else gets a horse that it's going to be a great asset to their life. So every time I get a new one, I try to make it a little bit better than the last one, and do that. So yeah, but I tend to I like the vaquero style and the kind of the traditional kind of deal. So I like doing that, and yeah, especially since it's my time. So it's
Mhm.
nobody's. I don't have any customers going, how come he's not doing this yet?
Do you always ride fully rigged? Like this is one of those things I see some of those guys and I'm like, we're at a clinic. Why do you need a 60-foot rope on, and the whole you're not using 80% of that. Well,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
more minimalist. So if I'm not gonna need it
yeah,
today, I kind of have it stripped away and as
yeah,
little if I
yeah,
don't have a reason for something, I don't have that thing right now. Are you
yeah.
that way or are you the whole ball of wax all the time?
No, no, I have like my minimum stuff I'm gonna have. Like I always have a tie down rope on the back of my saddle for like oh, it's normally like a 8 or 10 foot. I don't know if you've seen the tie down ropes like they use to tie down cattle with. So I always have one of those. Not that I think I'm going to tie down any cows in the deal, but I'll use it to tie a gate shut or you know help some. It's just one of those things. I use it more often for just tying something shut or just sticking on the end of tying somebody's lead rope onto their halter better or whatever.
Yeah,
Then I
it's like
use it
having
for
a pocket knife. Yeah, you just
yeah
could use it for a
yeah
whole lot of yeah.
yeah. So I normally have certain things on my saddle. I generally don't. I'm not packing 60 foot of rope on my saddle at a clinic, and I normally am not wearing leggings. I mean, if I'm think I'm gonna rope or something, or if I'll have my chinks or chaps or whatever on. But at a clinic, I normally don't, particularly since it's a lot. Normally, it's fairly warm, and it's like, do I really need to have all that stuff on? So yeah, I kind of I like to be traditional as is comfortable, as is practical. Maybe that's the good deal. So yeah, I try to be practical with it.
I am in the South, but yeah, I'm chinks 95% of the time, and maybe like December and January and February about the only time chaps might get pulled out for me. Or I guess if I had a string of clinics up north where it'd be colder, but let's be as aired out as we could be for the most
Yeah.
part. Do you
So
have some thoughts for us on groundwork? So I know you and I have had some private conversations about some of the big box clinicians and some of the things that they kind of go on, and I'm a little of the feeling that we've got a whole lot of people that have wound up using groundwork rituals as an excuse not to ride their horse because I've got to
yeah.
do all of this and I got 30 minutes of that and I don't have enough time today or whatever. So I know you're starting lots of horses
Yeah.
and you're starting them off of a horse sometimes and that groundwork may look a little different. So what does that world look like to you?
So for me, the illustration that I use, I tell people, look, there's lots of things, and I do some liberty too, which is almost all groundwork. I mean, it's like liberty steps, like you're going to be on the ground and the horse is going to be free. So I tell people, figure out where you want to be in that deal. I tell people, I was joking with some guys, and I like to use analogies because it can help people understand maybe a little bit better where they're situated at. And I told somebody, I said, how important do you think a pre-flight check is to a pilot? And they're like, oh yeah, like pretty important. I said, well, that's how I feel about groundwork. Like I'm gonna do some groundwork with my horse. Also, I don't know any pilots that I say, what's your most favorite thing about flying? And they say, oh, the pre-flight check. I just love that pre-flight check. Like that's something that they have to do to not die. Nobody, I said, I can tell you the person that likes doing pre-flight checks are mechanics. So you want to be a mechanic or do you want to be a pilot? Because pilots fly. We only do the pre-flight check to make sure we're not going to die. So, like, if you like being a mechanic, then be on the ground and do your pre-flight check and do the groundwork all you want, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I I wear cowboy boots and they're not made for walking. So I'm doing the groundwork I do. I'm going to make my goal is to do it so that my groundwork. In fact, I was working at a barn and had some horses. There were some client horses, and there was a guy that didn't like me very much. He was a pleasure rider, and of course, sometimes the foofy pleasure rider people and the cowboy types can kind of clash a little bit. So anyway, he said, "You're such a hypocrite," and I said, "Why?" He goes, "Well, you tell everybody to do groundwork, and then I just saw you get on that horse without doing any groundwork." And I said, "This horse?" I said, "Oh, I did a lot of groundwork." And he said, "Well, I saw you saddle him up and lead him off." I said, "Well, what about getting him from the pen to the hitching rail and then saddling him up and then leading him over there to the mounting block?" And then he said, "Well, that's not groundwork." I said, "Well, I was on the ground, wasn't I?" And so my goal is to get so that I can figure out where that horse is pretty good, just getting him out of the pen, stepping him through the gate, rolling his hindquarters over, shutting the gate, bringing his front through, going over, asking him to stand still while I saddle him, leading him over here to the mounting block or whatever. And by the time I got there, I kind of figured out he's pretty much with me. He's like, yes, sir. No, sir. Let's do it this way. And so my goal is to get where I people don't see the groundwork. It's not a bunch of circles with your stick and string and a flag, and it doesn't look like groundwork. It looks like you just go and get in your horse, and you know, and that's what kind of what it looks like. So it's important to me, and I'm always going to do some groundwork with my horse before I get on, but I'm working on making it less and less and less until it's just a small part of it. I'm just making sure that he's in the right frame of mind and he's still thinking of this relationship in the proper aspect, and then we're gonna go do some riding. Get to the fun part, the flying part.
Yes, sir. I like it. I'm right there with you. The whole if if I haven't figured out a little bit about this horse today between catching him and leading him through the gate and up to the, then maybe I need to rethink some things about what I'm paying attention to and all of that, because I'm right there with you. That gate in particular, that's like
Yeah,
the pass fail moment. I mean, how they go
yep.
through a gate and everything. I don't know a whole lot about my horse today when I do that. Absolutely. So you, a lot like me, you ride horses of a lot of different backgrounds, including some disciplines that may seem to be very much at odds with others. Like here, you are a vaquero guy, and you're starting dressage horses and eventers and things like that. So, would you tell us some of the differences or similarities in those horses? Like, are you taking dressage horses, and in the first few rides were backing up a step or two and rolling over our hawks, or is it a totally different picture for this discipline versus that discipline, or what?
Yeah, I tend to start them all off about the same. Like if they're a cow horse, and I'm starting them on a ranch, I know that cow horsing and ranch work is going to be kind of where that's where their destination is probably going to be. So I kind of know that, and I'm like, hey, we're gonna aim him this way. And the dressage horses and the jumpers and sport horses, I know that that's the direction they're going to be going. But I kind of think that they all should pass kindergarten. And I'm like, look, if you're going to be for me, I tell people if you're going to be a brain surgeon or rocket scientist or a trash collector, you still got to pass kindergarten in first grade. Like we don't go, oh, you're going to be a doctor, so you don't need to do X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, you still have to do this. So that's what I kind of start off with. I want them all to learn how to do some basic groundwork, get saddled nicely, stand well, get on, walk, trot, lope, back up, side pass, move your hips over, move your front over. The the horses that I think are going to be more used for cow stuff, well, I'm probably going to ask for more of a spin. The dressage horses, if you move your front over a little bit, side pass a little bit, I'm not really looking for that stuff. They're probably the the ultimate in the dressage would be the canter pirouette, which really isn't a spin at all. And so like they're never going to ask you to plant one hind foot or the other and do it. So if you can go forward and move that front end over, that's going to be plenty good for what you're asked to do. And so I just kind of get them so they're pretty willing to do whatever you want. They're going to try to move their hip over, they're going to try to move their front over, they're going to be pretty willing to do whatever it is that you're asking them to do. So that's kind of where I start them all at, and then I let people ask me what I like about colt starting. I said it's like kindergarten; they all pass. Like there's not very many horses that don't pass walk, trot, lope, stop, back up, turn around. Like they're pretty much all gonna pass. Like it's got to be a bad horse and not pass kindergarten. And so like, are they gonna graduate college? I don't know. That's up to you to figure out. Like I'm not telling you they're gonna win the Olympics, but they're all gonna pass kindergarten, or most of them are. So that's it's a satisfying thing about my job is they're all gonna get through my class. They're all gonna get walk, trot, lope, stop, back up, do that kind of stuff. And then well, you guys take it as far as you can and see how much money and time you want to put into each horse. And some of them are going to have a better ability and more talent, and some of them are going to be less talented or maybe just not as trainable. And that's for the owner and the next guy, the college professor to figure out. I'm just the kindergarten teacher.
So within your typical business of travel and colt start, how long, like, are you there a week or some places a month? Like what is, how long does kindergarten last for you, I guess? So,
Yeah, it depends on the whoever's taking it over. Like when I start colts for the public, I like to put at least a month on them. I think, 30 days is a pretty good, and it depends on the horse too, but most of them, if you're on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're a 5 rider, 4 or 5 rider or above, if I have your colt 30 days, you're going to be able to probably step on him and go riding around, and it's not going to be a big deal. If you're, a 2 or 3 rider, you might need to, after I get done with you, you might have to have somebody put some more miles on him before he's ready for you. And then there's ranches that I go to that I'm only there a week. A lot of the cow horse reining breeding facilities, I'll go there and start their colts. They like a week or two on them, and then their assistant trainers can take over from that. So normally it's at least a week. I would say average is about 2 weeks, and then the horses that I get for the general public, my clients and stuff, I'll keep them a month, and then the rest of them are, just kind of scattered about.
So, are you a fan of like starting a horse in a round pen and a halter and that sort of stuff, and one rein at a time and all of that? Because like a few of these things are things that certain disciplines might have a traditional problem with. There are some dressage people that if they saw you ask a colt to take a step back with a bridle from in the saddle, and he's not at third level yet or something like that, then they would be chastising you and telling you to put your helmet on. There'd be a whole thing going on. So are you, that's all part of it too, and the people that hire you understand that ahead of time, or what?
Yeah. Yeah, normally I don't tell people they have to do it any specific way. I just kind of do it the way I do it, and I tell them if they want it done separately, they're more than welcome to step on. Like they'll go, "Oh, you should do it this way," and I'm like, "Here you go, show me." You know, like, my mom was from Missouri, so show me. And so if you show me how to do it, and normally they're like, "Well, I didn't want to. I'm not gonna do it myself. I just want to, was gonna." Like, hey, this is
Yeah.
how it works for me. And so, like I say, it normally what I do is I tell people, hey, especially the first year, I'll say, hey, just let me try it for a week or so, and then if you don't like the results, hey, not a big deal, no hard feelings. But normally, they'll watch it for a week, and they're like, I can't believe you're riding out. The second week I'm riding outside in the arena or through the trails, and the especially for the warm blood, and the English types, that's not something that they think it's going to be a month of groundwork before somebody, before you even climb on. And so when you're, the end of the week, you're out riding them around through the trails or in the big arena or whatever, and it's going well. And they're like, okay, well, I guess, it works. And so they figure out, either they're gonna like the results or they're not. And if they don't like the results, then they probably shouldn't have me riding their horses. And if they do, then hey, go do your deal, and we'll take over after that.
Yeah. If so have you had some places that walk out and you've been there a week and they're like, oh my God, he's on an Oldenburg and he just started it and he is loping on a loose rein in the pasture and he's not dead? Like, that's not supposed to be possible. So you've had some of those sorts of results and everything.
Oh, oh yeah, yeah. They're like, that's you can't do that. And I was like, oh, don't. I wish I could remember the quote, but it was something to the effect that people that say it isn't possible, shouldn't interrupt those that are doing it, kind of deal. And it's like, yeah, everybody says it's not possible until somebody does it. And so,
One of the things I wanted to kind of get into with you, because I think we're very similar on our approaches and all. I feel like one of the most kindergarten-esque but underutilized tools that people have is to simply slowly and carefully pick up on one rein at a time when the horse is in motion, to slow them down and bend them and relax them. And it's almost the sort of thing that it's so simple it can't be true. But I find that to be so underutilized. Like 90% of the people I have come to clinics that are having a problem with their horse, I'm like, if you'll just do this for 10 minutes, magically all those problems you're having are just gonna melt away.
Yeah.
And you see it all the time. The dressage horse that's having problems now, like he never got that step in kindergarten. And if you just do this and you relax and stop pulling on both reins at the same time and all of that stuff,
Yeah.
just one rein at a time for a little while, all your problems are going to disappear. You find that as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think what happens is we kind of trap them a little bit with our reins and our legs, and then all of a sudden they're, fighting their head and they're slinging their body around because they can't figure out where to be. And yeah, it's a problem. I see it quite a bit, and yeah, it's tough. I think that's something that when I was first starting, one of the guys I learned from was Buck Brannaman, and then I went to Ray a little bit and a few other guys. There's a bunch of guys that are the same, that are very similar. Learned from Tom and Bill and that kind of stuff. And they were talking about that one rein, and anyway, I went to a lot of colt starting clinics and stuff, and he'd always start them off in one rein, and of course, Ray sometimes would take the halter off and let it go around there with nothing. But they would do one rein, and so anyway, I started when I start my colts, I start them in a halter and one rein, and just the lead rope and just bend them around one way or the other. And so anyway, we were at a clinic and somebody was talking. Buck was talking about he had a little colt starting clinic at his place, and it was kind of an invitation only. And he was talking about the the guys going out and just tracking some cows around on day 2 or day 3. And somebody said, in just a halter and lead rope? And he said, no, no, they have snaffle bits on, and he's like, and they were like, well, you don't let us do that. And he goes, well, that's because you guys couldn't, you guys can't handle it. And they were like, what do you mean? He goes, well, these guys, when I tell them don't pick up on both reins, well, first of all, I don't have to tell them that. And second of all, if I needed to tell them that, they could do it. They could not. I said, you guys, he said, you guys, if I tell you don't pick up on both reins, it's not that you're trying to not listen to me. It's that your body has been picking up on both reins for so long. The muscle memory's there. You can't not do it. Like you're going to pick up on the reins. Your body's just going to automatically do it. It's not something you have to think about. It just, the horse goes faster than you want and you just pick up with both reins. And you have to learn to just use one rein. And so anyway, he was just saying that, that's something that guys that ride green horses, we're more familiar with that e-brake there. We just kind of roll that hind over a little bit and let some of that extra energy and emotion and let that horse kind of calm down and relax a little bit instead of grabbing with both reins and trying to stop them. And so we get used to that, and we do it enough that the horse is just like, oh yeah, whatever, he's fine. And then we start picking up with both reins and kind of slowing him down. But if he's adrenaline starts pumping and he starts getting worried, we can loosen that outside rein, pick up with the inside a little bit more, roll the hip over a little bit, and kind of help him relax and kind of circle down there, spiral down. And I think what happens is when you're riding colts, it's a skill that has to be learned, and the riding colts is a lot different than riding older broke horses, and sometimes it's hard to help those people that have only been riding broke ones, and then they get a younger one or one that's got some anxiety and they don't know how to help them.
Well, you do bring up a point that I try to make and talk about with multiple guests, and that is about the disengaging of the hindquarters. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I see again with clinics and stuff is working with the general public. There's a lot of people that have done that way too much, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
and they sort of get a horse where they are the specific harmful lesson I think is that they train the horse to not bear weight on the outside hind, and they get them kind of running away from their feet. And then when they get to a little more advanced, they left kindergarten, now we're trying to do like a lead departure, and all of a sudden
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
a
going
lot.
to go very well. So would you
Yeah.
agree with that? Do you have some feelings on disengaging the hindquarters and kind of its place?
Yep. Yep. What I tell people is a lot of times tell people the disengaging of the hindquarters, and of course, most of the people that have been around horses a little bit, they've heard all the nomenclature, they've heard all the catchy phrases, and I'll go, okay, disengaging the hindquarters. What else do you call it? And sometimes somebody, eventually they'll say one rein stop or e-brake. I'll go, okay, so the emergency brake, it's the emergency brake. I said, yeah. I said, how many times do you use that emergency brake in your car? And they'll go, well, not very much. I said, well, there you go. Like, if you got brakes in your car for a reason. Like, yes, I understand if your brakes don't work, you should use the e-brake, but we kind of maybe use the regular brake first. Like, the e-brake's something I go to if the rest of the stuff isn't working. And yeah, when I'm first starting out in kindergarten, the first ride or two, yeah, make sure that hip goes over. I think people, they're worried about the horse running off, so they've got that rein a little bit tight, and every time that horse moves faster than they want it to, they grab the e-brake and move the hip over, and pretty soon it's a habit that they get into, and then they've also developed that habit in the horse, where the horse just flips his hindquarters out to the outside every time he gets a little worried, or the person picks up a little bit because he's like, oh, this is how I get released. And so I tell people, yeah, you're right, it's an emergency brake, and it's really necessary. Like, it's kind of like, if it's kind of important, like, you want that thing in there. Also, don't use the heck out of it. Like, try not to wear it out. Like, so yeah, it's one of those things that's I think that's one thing that I think the problem with humans is we lack a balance. It's like, is moving the hip over important? Yes. Also, can we overdo it? Yes. It's like, hey, is bridling up and posture important? Yes. Also, have we seen it overused? Yes. And it's like, so we're all trying to find that perfect balance where we're like, hey, this is too much, this isn't enough. And so it's trying to find that spot with the horse where we're comfortable and where the horse is in balance with anything.
You have talked a little bit about you starting Colts and some of the guys that helped and mentored you, and then you also have got some people that have kind of apprenticed with you, and they're now at a level where you can even send horses to them, and you don't have to worry about that coming back on you, or you would expect that it wouldn't. So why don't you tell us some of the attributes that you would find in a good Colt starter? What are the characteristics you're looking for there typically?
Man, there's so many. Are you talking physical or mental?
I would say probably more mental, but I mean physical. I guess
Yeah,
that jumps in there too. That's
yeah.
you got to
So
have a
maybe we
little
break.
durability
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah. Let's break it up. So the physical ones, they got to be kind of sticky. They got to be, they can't be falling off all the time. So they got to have a little bit of, not. You don't want them. I like it when they buck. Also, you can't be worried if they buck, and so that's probably the physical part is one that says, hey, I'm not scared if he bucks. I don't want him to buck. I'm gonna try to keep him from bucking, but if that thing decides he wants to have a come apart there, it's not gonna scare me enough to not get on tomorrow or to stop and get off. And so I would say a little bit sticky, physical enough. Agile enough to be able to, the horse maybe wants to move around. I see a lot of horses in clinics, they outmaneuver the person because the person's pretty slow and moves like a snail, and pretty soon the horse is outmaneuvering them. And so you kind of need to be athletic enough, agile enough to be able to fit. It's a physical job. It's not a job that's easy. So that's I'd say for the physical attributes, it's that. For the mental, I would say one that's a problem solver, trying to figure out why that horse is doing it and coming up with a situation that where you can help the horse figure out that that's what you want, the solution that you want. I I taught lots of horses on accident to do things I didn't want them to do, and it took me a little while to figure out, oh yeah, you shouldn't tie them. Like, I mean, I knew about pressure and release, and hey, don't let the wrong thing be the right answer. And I taught a horse to pull back because I just made enough mistakes. You tie him up with a bad halter. So then the next time you tie him up with a good halter, but a bad lead rope. And then you tie him up with a good halter and a good lead rope. Oh, but to a post that would come out. And so now pretty soon by the time you made all the mistakes, you've made five or six, and he's pretty good at pulling away from from stuff. And so now you really have to fix it. And then the next time you don't make those mistakes. And so you go, oh, don't, check your halter, check your lead rope, check what you're going to tie him to, and you go down the list. So you make less mistakes. So I think problem solving, not being not being angry. I think a lot of times we run out of tools in our toolbox, and now we're mad, and so now we're gonna, by golly, beat him a little harder and get him to figure it out. And I would say, yeah, the mental thing is just not being angry, being methodical, being problem solving. Go, hey, why did this happen? Well, okay, this happened. Okay, how do we fix it? And then go to the next step, and and a learning attitude, trying to figure out how to get a little bit better. And I think most trainers, they're always trying to get a little bit better. So that's kind of a natural thing but especially with the Colt starters, knowing every Colt's going to be a little bit different. And after a while, the more you've done, the less surprises you get. But at first, there's a lot of surprises. They'll surprise you with something.
One of the things I like to kind of get into is sort of the reality versus the ideal. We now have this whole social media world, and there's a whole lot of idealistic stuff that gets put out there. But for guys like us that have seen some of the bad stuff happen and all, how do you feel about that? Like I see a lot of anthropomorphism take place where I'm just listening to people talk about horses, and I'm like, you don't even know what a horse is. I mean, you're just, I don't know what unicorn you have in your head, but that's not a horse. Like, that's not how they are. And now there's kind of a movement about you have to have the horse's consent and that kind of stuff. And I'm still not exactly sure what that means, but I'm pretty sure I've done a lot of things with a horse where maybe I didn't have their consent when things went, and I sleep good at night regardless. I kind of feel, as we were talking about the Colt starter, one of the big things there to me is that I've never met a good Colt starter that was a really emotional, volatile sort of person. Most of the time, they kind of an even keel, they're unflappable. Something like life threatening can happen, and 2.5 seconds later, they're okay.
Yeah.
It's the bull rider wreck kind of a thing, and then they just pick up their rope and walk out of the arena. And so, what are you kind of agree with that? Because we sort of have,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
this whole movement of emotional horsemanship, and I'm in my horsemanship journey, I've always thought one of the biggest challenges is not being emotional, keeping all of that in check. And that sort of is almost like the path to the dark side for the Star Wars reference. You get into that whole emotional side of things, and I mean happy's an emotion, but anger's an emotion too, right? It all leads to the same. So thoughts?
Yeah, I try not to use, or particularly to impress my emotions on the horse. Like I don't think horses are super emotional. They they don't get mad. They'll push on another horse, and they may, you know one of them wants to get the other one's feed, and they'll lay their ears back at that one. If that one doesn't move, then they'll escalate up the pressure up until they're kicking and biting and striking, and then one of them's going to leave. And when the other one leaves, the other one doesn't chase him off. He doesn't say, now I'm going to extract my pound of flesh and now you're going to pay for it. He just says, okay, well, then we're done. And he eats his food, and the other one goes off, and 20 minutes later, they're standing head to tail swishing flies. And so they're not mad at each other. They're just like, hey, I think I'm bigger than you. I think you should move from me, and we're going to have this discussion, and then it's going to go from there. And I think what happens is sometimes we say, well, that horse is pushing on me, so he doesn't respect me or whatever. And he's like, no, maybe he doesn't. Maybe you haven't done anything to deserve that respect. So, just because he pushes on you doesn't mean you need to punish him. You might not back down, and you might bump into him a little bit, and you might have a discussion about whose feet should move from whose, but that doesn't mean I'm mad at the horse, and it doesn't mean the horse is mad at me. We're just having a discussion on who's going to lead this here dance. And like I say, I don't I think that it's true. If you're gonna work with horses, you need to be pretty chill, pretty even keeled in your emotions, and not always think the horse is out to get you, or the horse is mad at you, or the horse is doing something to spite you. It's like, probably not. It's pretty even keeled. So I think that's super important. And then I tell people in my clinics, I try to make my clinics where they're pretty open to anybody, and I try not to tell people they have to do it a certain way. And I tell people, look, you can do it any way you want. I'm going to show you how I do it. And there's a scale. You can go out there, and if your horse doesn't want to get caught that day, and you don't feel like imposing that on him, then don't impose it on him. It's not going to bother me any. But when I go out to catch my horse, it's not a, it's not if it wouldn't be too much trouble, could you get caught today so I could go for a ride? It's like we've got cows to put in, and so if you want, you're a little bit of you're in my employment. Like I'm feeding you, taking care of you, providing all the vet care for you, and so because of that, you need to earn your keep a little bit. And so I kind of that's how I kind of do it. But I tell people, look, if you don't want to do that, that's not. I'm not going to be mad at you if you think you've done enough with your horse today. Your horse has performed whatever you think he needs to do, and you want to take the rest of the day off and give him sugar cubes. That's totally up to you. Just you do you. And so I kind of help. I just kind of lead by example, and I tell people, look, my horses. I'm going to expect more out of my horse than you may out of yours. And I'm not going to tell you that you should expect more or should expect less. I'm going to tell you where I expect my horses to be, and then you can decide how you want your kids to operate. I tell people, and I'm showing my age a little bit. When you try to use references, a lot of times the younger kids they don't get it. But I was at a clinic and I said, remember in The Sound of Music when Mr. Von Trapp introduces all the kids to Maria and he blows his boatsman's whistle and all the kids march down the stairs and they line up in front of him and they each step forward and say their name and their age and they step back in line. And I said, yeah. And I said, okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, that's a 9. Like that's probably a little too structured for especially the younger kids and the older kids probably fine, but that's a lot of structure. Like that's high level of structure. And I said, then on the other end of the spectrum, you have Beavis and Butthead and The Simpsons. And I don't care where your kids operate. They can operate on either end of that spectrum or somewhere in the middle. And I'm going to tell you, for me, my horses are going to operate on a scale of 1 to 10 around a 7. And that's where I'm happy with them. And so you can have your horses operated at a 3 or 4 or at a 8 or 9. It doesn't matter to me. You pick where you are happy with your horses operating, and then I'll help you get that communication going. But I'm going to tell you what's possible. My job is to educate you on how to get that to happen and then inspire you to what could be possible with your horses.
Would you say on that scale, like you're perfectly consistent from start? So I'm thinking more of this in a linear timeline. So,
Yep.
so I'll give you the counter example here. Like I tend to be more strict with a horse that I'm new with. And then as they're on the road and we don't have any problems, then I might relax about certain things here and there.
Yep.
Because I know if I have a problem, I can pretty easily get them back here. Would you say that's fair, or are you a little more consistent than that, or what?
No, I would say I tell people, look, when you first meet somebody, you're not going to give them the keys to your car and the code to your gun safe because you don't know them. Now, if you know them a little while and they're pretty good friends of yours, and you go, hey, borrow my car, or there's something in my safe, could you go grab it? And you'll entrust them with more high value things. You're not going to do that with somebody you just met. So, and then at the same time, you meet some person, and then after you know them a while, you go, I don't think that guy's very trustworthy. I don't think that person. Well, you're not gonna. Hey, want to borrow your car? Mine's in the shop. And so the same thing with a horse. I'm gonna start off going, hey, look, I'm going to treat you well. I'm going to treat you civilly. I'm not going to make you jump through hoops, but there's some common decency things that we need to, some rules we need to establish. And then as the horse goes along, I'm going to say, well, I don't think if I gave you a little freedom, I don't think you'd use that against me. I don't think you'd try to hurt me if I gave you a little bit more freedom. And then there's horses that you're like, I think if I gave you a little more freedom, you'd try to kick my head. So, or paw at me or kick me in the belt buckle. So then I'm not going to do as, I'm going to say, you need to follow the rules. This other one, well, I'll give you a little bit more freedom. And so I go on a horse by horse basis, but I totally agree with you. I'm going to have my minimum expectations, and then depending on how the horse behaves and responds, I'm going to say, I don't think you try to use the skills that I give you or the freedoms that I give you against me. So I'm going to let you have more freedom.
So I'll even tell on myself here a little bit. I know this is the kind of thing that would absolutely curl some people's hair, but like my finished horses, I would even allow them to graze in a bridle or to like riding down the trail if they get a little nip here and there, as long as they didn't really leave me. I'm
Yeah.
okay with that because I feel like in the course of a 12-hour day, it's reasonable for them to put a little something in their stomach here and there. And I know if I pick up on the reins, they're going to be right there in the middle
Yeah.
with me.
Yeah.
So that's one of those things. And I know there are people that would just drive them absolutely crazy. But I also know the way a horse's digestive system is supposed to work. And if I leave it empty for 12 hours, that's not going to be conducive to my horse being problem free
Yeah.
down the road. So one thing you mentioned a minute ago, I would like to get into with you was bucking, because again, I've definitely heard some people and even a couple of highly experienced people that I think are using this more as a marketing thing, but sort of that divergence from reality. There are definitely people that feel like if a colt ever bucks, you failed. You failed the colt and you skip some steps or something like that. And I kind of just feel like it's not that big of a deal. Some of them are going to buck, some of them aren't. Some of them, if I took 3 weeks, I could probably have had them not buck, but was that one thing worth 3 more weeks, or was it just let's get it over with and 20 seconds later we're fine? Or so what are some of your thoughts on that? Do you see that movement
Yeah.
of if the horse ever bucks you failed? Have you come across that? Or
Some of those people that have like, oh, same thing, that whole consent, asking for consent. If your horse bucks, you've done something wrong. And it's like, oh, if the horse is still bucking after a while, yeah, maybe you need to kind of, it could be the horse or it could be the way you've gone about working with it. It could be one of the two. It doesn't mean it has to be, the trainer. It doesn't mean it has to be the horse. It could be a combination of either one. But yeah, I don't worry too much about it. I There was somebody that came to one of the clinics and they were talking about if the horse bucks, and I said, and anyway, they had, God works things out sometimes in the most peculiar ways. And anyway, there was a pasture there where we could turn our horses loose, and there was 2 or 3 big runs. And so anyway, I didn't say too much because I don't like to stir up controversy. She turned her horse loose, and he went, he'd been, in a stall for a day or two, and we were going to turn our horses loose, and so I turned my horse loose, and he trotted out there and laid down and rolled around and got up and started eating, and she turned her horse loose, and this thing runs out there and it's bucking and kicking and running around the pasture, and I said, "Man, what'd you screw up?" And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Your horse is bucking." And she's like, "Well, he just does that for playing." I said, "Well, if he does it in playing, I mean, how do you know he's not playing when you put the saddle on?" And you told me if he ever bucks, we've done something wrong. And so she kind of had to think about it for a second. And was like, "Oh well, I mean, he's doing that just playing." And I said, "I think you're right. I don't think there's anything wrong with a horse playing and bucking, and yeah. So sometimes, I mean, I know kids that the first time you put a set of clothes on them, they don't and they try to take them off too. But not that wearing clothes are bad. I mean, yeah,
Hmm.
I know some people they takes that kid doesn't like wearing shoes, and so he's always coming out of his shoes. Well, it's like look. So yeah, I don't worry too much about it unless it becomes a big habit or something. Then I'll start looking for reasons. Maybe we could get it fixed or adjusted. But yeah, I think some horses they never want a buck, and some horses they're a little bit cinchy or a little bit cold backed or whatever, and they like play. Some of them like playing around. They'll kind of crow hop around there, just kind of acting fresh. And some of them have an issue. Some of them just don't like being confined to the saddle, and so they kind of crow hop around there. So there's lots of different reasons to do it, but I don't worry too much about it.
To me, that
I'm
kind of goes
not.
back to the non-emotional, even keel sort of a thing. Some people
Yeah,
see a horse buck and they have a really strong emotional reaction to it, and then some of us, it's just not a big deal. And I think you could apply that to sitting back and
yeah,
other things like that, where it's just not as big a deal to everybody. To me, that's part of the putting their stuff on the horse, because I know that horse
right,
that just did that in 7 seconds is fine again, and the
yeah.
person is worried for the next 45 minutes. I'm like, oh,
Or
what?
45 days, or
Yeah.
45 days. He bucked once, 45 days ago. Well, I mean, that was a month and a half ago. Why are you worried about it? Has he bucked since? No, but he bucked him. Like,
Yeah.
hey,
Whose emotions are we trying to regulate here exactly? Huh?
yeah, yeah,
Well, one of
exactly.
the things I know we wanted to talk about together was some of the common myths and misinformation, misconceptions, that sort of
Mhm.
stuff out there. So, do you have any of those on your plate you'd like to get off and clear up?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different, and they're all rooted in truth. They've all got a little bit of truth somewhere in them, and it's just we've kind of I just was working on a video for my YouTube channel, and I entitled it "Never and Always." And anyway, a friend of mine he put on there, "Rules are for the strict adherence of fools and children, and the careful consideration of thoughtful people." And I thought that was really good, and I was like, there we have to, you know. Anyway, there was the one I've heard about, people will say never and always, and I go, yeah, those aren't really very true. And the one of them I bring up is everybody's heard never walk behind a horse, and we go, well, yeah, most of the time. And I'm like, yes, if you don't know very much about horses, or if you're a child, they, yeah, never. Why? Because they make one mistake and it can really hurt them or kill them. Like that's a mistake you don't want to have happen. And then yeah, when you get a little older and you've been around horses a little while, you can kind of tell. You know the signals when that horse says, "I don't trust you and I don't want you behind me." You can see that from a ways away, and you go, "Yeah, don't walk behind that horse." And then the other horse, he's like perfectly chill, and you can rub him all over, and well, you can walk right around behind that one, no problem. And so there's a lot of, that one. There's, never wrap the rope around your hand. I was doing a clinic a few weeks ago, and I wrapped the rope around my hand once, and a couple people were aghast at that, and they said, "You should never do that." And I said, "Never?" And they said, "Never." I said, "Well, when I'm roping, I have 7 coils. I have 7 wraps around one hand that I'm going to rope a steer with that's like not broke to lead. That's okay." But I couldn't wrap the lead rope around my hand once with a half-inch soft rope. And they kind of thought about it for a second. And I was like, look, I mean, I understand, but there's a particular way you should do it. And then there's ways you shouldn't. And so
I kind
I
of do
think,
that. I see that one too, and I do. I have coils in my hand all the time. I don't do the folded up thing, and so I
yeah,
tell people that's what I do. I hold it like this, and if I have a problem, if you just point your hand at the horse that's running away from you, he's just gonna pull all those coils right off,
yeah,
and you're gonna be fine. And so
right.
it's really not it's not that big of a deal, but uh, that's a
Yeah,
good one.
I think there's a lot of stuff that sometimes I think there's there's two reasons it happens. One of them is we've just tried to make it where we try not to get kids and idiots hurt, and so that we just say don't do X, Y, or Z. And then the other one is, some clinician will be trying to make money, and so he'll come up with a, hey, if I can just say don't do this or don't do that, and I'm like, oh, come on now. That's not that's maybe taking it a bit too far. So I think there's two reasons why it happens, and sometimes we're just trying not to get those that don't have enough experience or education hurt, and then the other one is some snake oil salesman's trying to make money and and selling people a bill of goods. But yeah, those are the few of them I see.
Well, one of the things I like to talk about too with fellow Colt starters that have done this is some of the differences that you might see in various breeds. So most horse trainers kind of find a niche, and if you're like you had said earlier, a reining horse trainer, your perspective of what starting a colt is probably pretty different than you and I's perspective, who've seen a lot of other type, because kind of like you were mentioning, those horses are kind of born pretty much broken, ready to go, and your biggest job is not to mess them up. And then there are other horses that really require more thought and experience and so forth. The opportunity to not mess them up is a lot narrower. So
Right.
with some of the different breeds and stuff, what are like some of your favorites and some of the different characteristics and things you think of when you think of starting those breeds? I guess the big divide would be the English type horses versus the Western type horses, but there's some overlap there and also.
Yep. Yeah, I tell people I heard it when I went overseas. I go to Europe and Africa a little bit to do some clinics, and over there they have a saying. It says horses for courses, and basically it's if you're going to go jumping, use a jumping horse. If you're going to go packing, use a packing horse, and so anyway, it's the same thing. I think all the horse breeds were bred for to have specific characteristics. And the one you want to use to cross the Arabian desert may not be the one you want to go chase cows down with or rope whatever or go show jumping with. And so, there's lots of different vehicles. I've got a motorcycle and a semi, and guess what? They're both great vehicles for their purpose, and they suck when I try to use them for the other purpose. And so, like, it's the same thing with horses. It's like, look, some of them are those warm bloods that are good at jumping are really scopy and they're really, yeah, try to go work a cow with one and you're not going to have fun. You're not going to enjoy it. And so same thing when you're trying to get maybe your hot-blooded little cutter that really watches a cow and he'll get down and yeah, well, we go out trail riding with him and when the stinking turkey flies out of the bushes, like good luck. Like he'll roll back through himself far enough that you will be, you'll be trying to look for something to grab onto. So, you know, appreciate the horse's skills and attributes for what they are, and don't try to put them in a box. Don't go, well, I love this little Arabian, and he's gonna be my go down the trail and drink beer horse because it might work. I'm not saying I've seen some Arabians that were super quiet and they were super chill, and I've seen some that were anything but chill. So, you figure out where your horse is, and then try to appreciate them for what they are, and some of them are going to like doing one thing, and some of them are going to like doing something else. So help them. You it's a relationship, and that involves you and the horse. And the thing I like about being a horse trainer is I get to appreciate both of them. Like I really appreciate those horses that can get down and cut and work a cow and spin. And man, I love it. That's like, you're like driving a little sports car. I mean, you can go like, hey, let's go play. And then I like the big, kind of dopey looking, relaxing, quiet, half draft, whatever, that just goes down the trail. I'm like, hey, man, this is going to be great for some person that just wants to go down the trail and have a good time or whatever. And so I realize the attributes of both. And then I get to go, hey, this one's going to be good at X or going to be good at Y. and I appreciate both of them for what they bring to the table, and I also don't try to make one into something he's not.
Do you do very many restarts?
So I'm glad you phrased it like that. I tell people you can't restart one. It's
Right.
like you can say I'm going to retrain it. It's like, hey, it's a little bit like, hey, once, like, well, it's like, hey, I'm a new virgin. No, you're not. No, no, you're not. Like it. No, there was the you got started, and we can retrain some things, and we can readjust how the horse maybe responds to stuff, but that stuff's in there, and we're gonna work around it. But it's not like we can push the alternate control delete button on the horse and get the Men in Black little light blaster and go, hey, we're gonna erase all your memory and we're gonna go do it. No, like you can call it whatever you want, but so I do a lot of horses that maybe got into some trouble before, they didn't get along with a previous owner or trainer, and so they're kind of getting re-educated. So I do a fair amount of that, but not as much now. A lot more before. Now I don't do as much of it, but I still do a little bit. I try to tell people, hey, if the more trainers he's been through and not been successful, the less likely I am to be able to fix it. Like, if he's been through some 3 or 4 people, mm, unless they all three of them really were very poor, there's not a good chance that I'm going to be able to. I'm not mad. I'm not magic. I'm you know
Yeah.
sending him to a new trainer might be worth it. But I'll help consult with them, and at least sometimes I'll bring them over and I'll kind of help them through a spot or two or whatever. But um, I try to tell people the when I'm at a cult starting thing, I always like asking people questions that make them think. And one of the things I tell them is, "What's the most important thing you teach a cult?" And of course, they'll come up with a bunch of things, and I go, "That's a really good answer, but it's not the one I'm looking for." Oh, that's a really good answer. And then at the end, I go, "The answer is nothing wrong. Like, if you teach the horse 3 things that are right and 2 of them that are wrong, you're not making progress. Like, you're going backwards. Like, don't teach the horse anything wrong. Even if you only teach him one thing, as long as it's the right thing, you'll make progress. You teach him 2 things that are right and 1 thing that's wrong. He doesn't know which one's wrong. So you're instilling some things that are going to come back to bite you later. So I tell people the most important thing, especially in the beginning, is get those. And that's something I see in the industry that's lacking, is colt starting. Now, there's so many people that it's hard to find a colt starter in their area. There's just not very many good ones, and I would say that's something that I've been trying to work on. Is I've got a lot of kids that come to me and they want to learn how to start colts, so I kind of help them, and I'm hoping that we get that industry a little bit better, so that we get people that are better at starting colts and getting those kids through that first, kindergarten, first grade thing, and then they can go out in the rest of the world and they can make their way and get their fortune. But getting them through the first start there's not as many people that do it now.
So I'm having some thoughts here as you're talking, which I love people that are kind of inspirational. I just have a hard time organizing all the little thoughts I have that I refer to it like trying to catch sparks that are coming out of a
Yep.
campfire sometimes. So one of the things you mentioned earlier was about cult starters being fairly methodical. I don't know about you, but I get bored really, really easy. And so I probably have never started 2 horses the same. I do kind of, jump around a little bit, but I think I have a good enough understanding of the map that we're not going to
Yep.
get lost or confused here. I kind of view the methodical stuff as more for the novices, like your rules are for children and idiots. And once you've done that enough and you kind of recognize where this thing is going, now you can play outside the lines a little bit and not get
Yep.
yourself too lost. So one of the sayings that a guy said to me early on in my career, I was starting this colt that was the sort of colt that you knew he was going to be a good kid's horse one day. He just was Nothing,
Yep.
nothing bothered
Laid
him
back.
real easy. Yeah. And I'm doing all of this desensitizing stuff with him, going through my little process. And the guy's watching me for a while, and he goes, "Why are you doing all of that?" And I was like, "Well, it's on my list." He says, "If you're driving an 18 wheeler and you're not pulling a heavy load, you could skip some gears." And that
Yeah.
has always stuck with me. That he's absolutely right, that this is not necessarily a good time investment, and this horse might need to spend way more than that on this next one, but
Yeah.
this horse isn't bothered by all that stuff. I can skip a few of
Yeah.
those things. Not
Yeah.
that you want the holes in the foundation at some point, right? But uh,
Yeah, sometimes if you wave the plastic bag around him a little bit in your checklist, and that's the thing I hate about the recipe. It's like, oh, you gotta flap the stick 27 times on both sides of him, and it's like, look, if you can wave a plastic bag up there and rub him on the back and underneath the belly, and he's like, yeah, I'm fine with that. Like, you can do it if you want to, but it's not gonna make. He's already told you he's fine with it. Like, it's definitely necessary if he says, I think that's gonna kill me, and I'd like to kick your kneecap off. Yes, then probably helping him understand that that's going to be okay is something that's worthwhile and probably necessary. But if he's just like, yeah, yeah, he's had blankets on him and kids climbing all over him and whatever, he's like, I'm fine. Then you don't need to do all that. You don't need to do all that stuff. You can skip a step or two and go, hey, how about the blanket? How about the saddle?
this is something I kind of like to go into with all of the guys that I talk to that have been in this business. I should say ladies too. I'm not trying to be, but they've been in the business long enough, decades, to see
Hmm.
things changing through the years. And you talked about this a little bit with the reining horses. And honestly, I'm not sure if we talked about that before the conversation, the official podcast started, or not, but it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine too. We have improved horses through breeding a lot in the last 30 years, 40 years. But like you, I am concerned that the lack of tough horses is taking away some of the skills of the next generation, because they've only ridden these reining horses that are born to stop and turn around, or the Patrick King had talked about some of the Lusitanos that are born doing canter pirouettes and that kind of stuff. It's just so ingrained in their genetics that you don't really have to be skilled to get them
Yeah.
to do it. And I really think that that's one of those things I fear is we're, and I don't mean this in the amateur horse population. I'm talking about the professionals here.
Right.
That we've got some kids. I've certainly seen this. Some of these kids where they think this is a tough horse. I need a little help, and you go see the horse, and you're like, yeah, this is a this is not a
Yeah.
tough horse. I have good
Not tough.
news for you. We're going to be
Yeah.
fine here. Uh, so have you run across some of that? Do you have similar fears or?
Yeah, I so my background are a lot. I've done a lot of the Mustang stuff, and so I see kind of the like I see where you're coming from, but a lot of the kids came up through that Mustang thing, and so a lot of the kids that I get for internings have done the Mustang thing, and so you know,
Mhm.
go get one that's not very you know that's been bred for natural selection, which means not trainable and tough, and so.
Yeah,
Those are yeah, those are tend to be yeah, a little bit tougher. So you're right. I think making the ones that are trainable and super easy, they tend to make us soft. They're not we're like, hey, this one's pretty easy. And so I do think that it's helped the industry getting horses that are more trainable, but also, we don't our skills haven't maybe kept up with it. And also, it makes us a little lazy. Like if a horse, we have to work for more than a week on something, we're like, oh, this one's not going to make it. We should just quit. And it's like, you only spent a week on it. Like try working a little harder at it. Just because it didn't come easy doesn't mean that horse is not gonna not going to be the something that can work. So yeah,
Yeah,
I,
I have.
I, I do. I have seen that where the horses they'll give up too easy on a horse. It's like, man, try putting a little work into it, a little elbow grease.
I had a pretty good friend of mine that sent me some videos of her horse she had sent to a trainer. He was a reining horse guy, and he told her after riding that horse 2 weeks that she needed to put it down because he couldn't get it to slide more than about 3 or 4 feet, and it wasn't turning around real smooth yet. And I mean, she sent me the videos, and I'm watching him like he's kind of a green kid, and that's all right. But like this horse isn't remotely doing the kind of stuff that would I would I'm. It takes an awful lot before me to
Yeah,
make that kind of a
yeah,
recommendation. So,
right. Yeah.
um, one of the things you brought up there, I'm really glad that you did because I really haven't thought about this in that way. But the Mustang stuff, I have not participated in it myself because I have some objections to some of the stuff that the BLM does, and I don't want to be a part of their marketing
Yeah.
program. In fact, I'll tell you that I don't even know if they still have this on their website, but I had gone on there and I did the math and all myself and did a little digging into the deal. Would you like to guess what we spend on the Mustangs per head for their lifetime?
Oh, I mean, it's got to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, it's got to be, yeah, I would say 10,000 or better,
So
20,000 per
it
head.
so we budget 50,000, and then in true government style, we overspend by about 50%. So a horse
Yeah,
that never sees a vet, never has his hoof trimmed, never eats anything but hay and water, or is out on a range, we somehow managed to spend $75,000. And the average age of them is 8, not
yeah,
28, not
yeah,
18, 8.
eight, yeah,
And so when I got to looking into that stuff, I can't, I would love to do it. I think it would be fun, but I just cannot bring myself to be a
yeah,
part of it. But like you just said, I do like the fact that like we got a lot of these young kids that are doing that, and Mustangs are legit. You're not going to bypass some of the tough stuff and get out of there nice and easy. You're going to
yeah.
have to stand forth, and they're probably going to try to kill you a time or two in the process. So
And
I like that.
especially for the younger trainers, they're free. Like, hey, where else? I mean, I tell people, look, like I agree that politics behind the some of the stuff the BLM does, and yeah, we could go on.
Yeah, there's way
We could get both of ourselves in a lot of trouble talking about that very long. But anyway, um, I tell the kids, hey, look, it's a free competition. Like, you don't have to pay for the horse. You don't have to pay to enter. Like, all you got to put is the work into it, and then you sell the horse to somebody else, and then they get to take it. And I said, hey, look, if you want to talk about free advertising and getting some education and experience, hey, this is the deal. So just that's what I tell them. I say, hey, go try one. If you're looking for advertising and experience, that's a good avenue to go to, especially for those kids that can't afford to go buy a prospect and train it for a year. And yeah, those are 3-month deals. Train it
for
for three
sure.
months and sell it. Yeah.
Yeah, especially you don't have a full barn. You got five
Right.
hours a day to sit here and play with
Yep.
this thing because that's kind of what that's
Exactly.
going to take. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
well, why don't you talk with us a little bit about one of the areas we are a little different? At least I gather is you coming more from the Ray Hunt school and all. You do a lot of starting colts off of another horse, and I've done
Uh-huh.
some of that, but not a ton of it. I'm more I guess I started that stuff. The seed got planted more from John Lyons for me with his round pen stuff where you're standing on the ground with, and I haven't done nearly as much of that off of the horse. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your views there and the pros and cons of working a
Mm.
horse off of another horse?
Yeah, so I don't know that it's much different. I do it on the ground and off horse. I like doing it off a horse because I think it's a little bit faster and it's a little bit quicker, more efficient. So, one thing I said before was, don't teach a horse anything wrong. And so if you have your saddle horse and he's on the end of the halter and you dally to your horn and you use a flag a little bit and that horse decides he's leaving town, like your horse can hold him. And if you're on the ground, he can pull that rope through your hand. Now he's not going to get away from you. He's not going to leave the county because he's in a round pen, but he's still going to be able to get away from that flag. He's going to put some distance between you and that flag. And so I kind of like to be able to say, hey, look, some things are going to happen, and I want to teach you that, hey, just because you're a little worried doesn't mean you can jerk on me and leave town and pull the rope through my hand. So I like being able to have the horse there to kind of back me up as a similar to like a snubbing post or something. But I like the horse that it's flexible enough that the horse will move a little bit. There's some give in his feet. He'll if he's standing there and a horse pulls on him, he'll move 6 inches or a foot. So it's not like it's tied hard and fast, but also my saddle horse, he goes, hey, come here. And so he won't let him pull him very, very far anyway. And so I like that. I like the fact that it keeps me a little safer. We're talking about those spoiled horses, and sometimes you don't realize that they'll run you over and step on you and bite you and kick you. And if I'm on my saddle horse, I feel way safer. Like I've had horses run into my saddle horse and move us a foot or two. And I think, man, if I was on the ground, he'd have run plumb over the top of me. And so I like that effect. I think for me, it's one of the best ways to start a colt, but it's super challenging as far as trying to teach other people. You have to first of all have a horse that is capable of doing it, and then you have to ride that horse while you're flagging the other one. So it's a very complicated to learn how to do it, but I don't know that it's the basics are pretty much the same as doing it afoot. You're just able to move your feet a little bit easier. You've got something you can dally to, so you can stop that horse from trying to leave if he decides he wants to jerk on you a little bit, make yourself a little stronger. Like I say, you're a little safer. You can get over the top of the horse so the horse can see you on both sides. You can rub your hand over it and like I say, I've had some horses try to, you rub them on the neck and they go to sling their head around there and they'll bump into my horse or something, and it's a little bit safer for me. So I like it, but I tell people it's more of an advanced. It's way more advanced. If you're not used to doing it,
Yeah. It-
don't try it for the first time.
that is sort of how I feel about it too. Like if you do not want to be learning to dally and have a horse on the end of the line at the same time. There are pieces
No.
there you need to have already mastered,
Yeah.
or there's going to
Yeah.
be chaos going on.
Yeah.
And yeah, uh,
Both
one of
all three of you will end up in the wreck.
yes, sir. Uh, one of the things I have found, it's really, really good for the horse you're using as well. Like I've had a couple horses that were immature, and sometimes you have that horse you've ridden them pretty good while, but they just really are, they're the one that needs a job or something like that. And once you've ponied a few horses off of them and all, they kind of figure that deal out and they start working with you. Like I say, that horse challenges them and pulls them around a little, and they go, hey, I know how this is going to go. We're not going to, and they get like a little pride of work,
Yeah.
and then they're with you and all that. And man, you can just see them blossom, and it's like they go from a boy to a man on you there in a couple of weeks of working other horses.
Yeah.
I have definitely found, at least for me, there is nothing quite like working a horse off of another horse. So what I mean by that is, like, you can have a horse that you've worked cattle with and done a lot of stuff with, but when you get them in a position where you ask them to go push on another horse, like, there's no preparatory step there. It's always a baptism by fire sort of a moment for me. You feel that way as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've had horses that, they've roped lots of cattle and they've, rounded up stuff and done a lot of things. And then you ask them to run, move a horse around or step in front of a horse or chase one and rope it. Man, a lot of, like I say, a lot of times it'll pull back a curtain on a spot that you didn't know existed. They'll get hot and pushy and yeah, it can it can definitely yeah, like it's baptizing by fire because they
Mhm.
sometimes they'll really get worked up a little bit. But I do think it's really good for them, man. They'll figure out, hey, this is what you want me to do, and they'll so fun. There's different things for me in training that give me goosebumps, and that's one of them when I'm working a horse and I'm, just going along there and I'll get them like maybe saddled up or whatever, and I'm pushing them around with my saddle horse. So I'm saying, hey, I'll have a flag and I'm pushing that horse, and he's probably normally he's loose in the round pen or whatever. I'll be pushing him around, and my horse will be helping me push him. I mean, his attitude, his expression on his face says you should go, and I'll be pushing him around. And then I'll say, yeah, he's doing pretty good. And then I'll decide that, hey, I want to sidle up beside that colt and pet on him a minute and get the halter rope so I can do a little groundwork or I can get unsaddled him or whatever. And your body will change and you'll see that horse's expression soften, and he'll sidle up to that horse like, hey, I just want to hang out with you. And that horse will just stand still, and you'll just a minute ago he was had his ears laid back and was pushing that horse around, and your expression, your body said, hey, I want to go over there and catch him. And you'll see that horse just get soft and kind of he'll just his whole body will change, and he'll just kind of go over there and he'll kind of arc around there like he just wants to sidle up to that horse, and he'll help you get close to that horse. And if that horse moves away a little bit, he'll move towards him just at the same speed. Just like if you were on the ground and you were trying to reach up there, the horse moves away, and you'll just keep going nice and easy and have your hand out there and pat on him a minute. And it's so fun for me to feel that in that saddle horse, because
Mhm.
it's like your brains are connected. Like you have connected with that saddle horse on a level that's super intimate. Like you're like we're thinking the same thoughts. I mean, that's a fun place to be.
Like he becomes your wingman or something like that
Yeah,
almost. So yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's like you're twins or something. Like you and your and we all have friends and partners and stuff that we know what each other's thinking. You finish somebody's sentence. It's that type of connection where you just think something and your horse is going, got it, don't worry, got it. I feel I understand what you're wanting to do, and I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna take care of it for you. And that's so much fun to get to that level of communication with a horse.
Absolutely. What sort of milestones are you looking for before you're going to use a horse for that? Is that something you had to have ridden a few years or three rides or somewhere in the middle or what?
Um, yeah, somewhere in the middle. Like, I like doing it. Like, it's a way easy. The better the horse is, the more the more solid the horse is, the easier it is to do. I like doing it. Like I say, one of the reasons I like using a saddle horse is because that horse also gets worked, and so I kind of like, working two horses at the same time. So if I've got a bunch of horses like this ranch I'm at now, they've got 5 or 6 horses that I've started before. So, I'm using one of those to pony around some of the young colts because hey, it's good for I can get two horses run at the same time or worked at the same time. So that's a little bit more efficient. So I like doing it. And I just kind of uh my judgment is if I can so there's two parts of the equation. One of them is my saddle horse. How solid is he? How much will he listen to me? If things start to go a little south, will he still listen to me and do what I ask him to do? And then the other part of the equation is the horse I'm ponying. If I'm ponying a horse that's used to being ponied and is not going to pull back and sling his head and try to kick my saddle horse, then I can use one that's a little bit greener. Like I could pony something that maybe I've only rode 3 or 4 or 5 times. And if I pony my good saddle horse, that won't be a problem at all. My horse will just lead. I could pony him, not have to dally. Now, if I'm going to pony something I think is gonna, the first time or two, and maybe it's a Mustang that I have to rope, and he's gonna sling his head and jump around there, then I need something that's way more capable. So, I try to, I would say probably on average, after I've ridden them for 2 weeks, I'm gonna probably not gonna do the first day, but I would do the second or third day.
That's fair enough. I have had conditions where I was ponying colts off the colts, like starting 4 or 5 colts and take the gentlest ones and then pony the rest of them on day two and all. And I don't know that I would recommend that for just anybody, but man, that's a broke set of colts before a couple of
Yeah,
weeks. They're way further than most of them are a couple of weeks, but you
yeah.
got to survive the journey in the first place. So,
And that's the thing is, depending on the skill of the person, that you're like a pretty good colt starter that's used to riding colts. Well, we can get away with that because we can we fill in for our colt way more. And then if you have a person that doesn't, that's they're going to be a little late with their cues. They're not going to see a situation start to shape up. We see the horse out there and we're like, oh, he's going to do this next, and so we're already starting to turn our horse or get our horse ready to respond to what we're going to want to do. The other person, they don't even know that's coming. Like the horse does it, they're like, oh, I didn't know he was going to do that, and I was like, yeah, I saw that about 3 seconds ago. And so the more familiar you are with reading the horse, the easier it is for you to use a horse that's not quite as solid or not quite as advanced.
I don't want to be contrary or like trying to disagree with you. It's just a little, it's my perspective, I guess, of what
Yeah,
I've seen. But
yeah,
I certainly like that there are some really good colt starting hands that, there was a time period where every clinician had a colt starting video. And I agree with you. We kind of seem to be a decade beyond that or something now. But I'm trying to figure out how to say this without being condescending because I don't mean to be. But like as I have done more and more clinics, I'm watching people have problems with broke horses, not colts. And so I guess my estimation of like I would here's what I'm trying to say. I don't think 90 maybe 95% of people belong on a 30-day colt. I may be a little exaggerated on that, but I've seen way too many people have trouble with way broker than a 30-day colt. And you may have done I've done some colt starting clinics. I haven't done a ton of them, and so maybe I'm not as comfortable watching Gentiles as Baxter Black would have called it get bumped around there a little bit. um, but so I guess that would be my thoughts for you is sort of how you gauge that, because that's one of those things that the more I do the clinic stuff, the less inclined I am to show people certain things because I
yeah,
feel like a large part of like the pony and the horse. I've been thinking of doing a video on that for a while, and then every time I really get to thinking about it, I'm like, this is probably something I should not do
yeah.
and show the public because I'm going to get
Right.
somebody killed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally agree with you on that one. Like, there's so many people that you're like, yeah, and I don't want to be too condescending, but there's always every year there's at least one person in a clinic somewhere that I think to myself, they should take up swimming. You know, they should, they should, they should, they should take up something besides horses because they're close to getting in trouble. And so, yeah, I hear where you're coming from because there's a lot of people that are having problems with their horses they've had 2 or 3 or 4 years of riding and they're still having problems with them. And you're like that one's not bad. Like that one's pretty easy. Like like you shouldn't have a problem with that horse. And I think part of it's we've got a lot of new people coming in, that haven't been around horses. I think we were talking the other day about common sense, and the problem with it is there's a lack of it. We used to have a lot more consequences for actions, and now, yeah, there's not as many consequences. And so there's a whole group of people that have grown up where we told them the preparation H was for external use only, and we never let them we never let them, you know, there was too many OSHA rules, and we never let them whack their finger with a hammer. We never let them, and so they don't think through. things. And so sometimes that common sense, logical stuff doesn't, oh yeah, you're just like, oh my goodness, what are you doing? But there is a bunch of that. And yeah,
We, yeah, we live in a world where every single day you can watch a new video of some tourist that tried to pet a buffalo in
yeah,
Yellowstone, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Or do equally stupid things, I mean, just not, I mean, you're like, oh my goodness, what did you think was going to happen there? But yeah, so yeah, there are a bunch of, you know, and that's where I'm trying to just get people to just be better about horses, just learn. And as much as I like, learning from different videos, I just wish people would go to more clinics and just get more hands-on, one-on-one, especially for the beginners. For those people that are on a scale of 1 to 10, if they're a 0 to a 3, I think clinics are the best money you can spend. Go to somebody that's pretty good and learn that kind of stuff. And then after you get pretty good, then you can watch the videos. There's just too much nuance in that's lost in the video for me. They'll be like, "Hey, here's how you start the Colt," and you're like, "There's there's a lot of you would think, that it's like I didn't know I had to say that," and but yep, you have to say that.
Yeah.
Really? So yeah, it's tough, but yeah, I see it. And when I first started doing clinics, I stupidly thought I want to gear my clinics to the advanced people. And yeah, I mean, I love teaching advanced people, and I love it when they show up because I enjoy helping those kind of people. But most of the people that come to the clinics are basic stuff, and that's what they want to learn, that's what they need. And so I really kind of work on helping those people get just the next step in their horsemanship journey. And a lot of times it's pretty basic stuff.
One little thing I'm going to add to that, if you don't mind, is I see a lot of times people don't want to necessarily spend the money to go ride with a really good clinician, and they kind of stay with the local hero, which is that's fine, but sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And I've seen a lot of people that spent 5 years on something we could have solved in a Saturday. If
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about there. Another
Yeah.
thing I was just going to say is that, like, we do live in this world of virtual and all of this, and I almost feel like it's getting to a point where we have to justify why a clinic. And to me, there's absolutely no replacement for someone very experienced having the ability to read your horse in real time. Because a lot of
Yeah.
times when people contact us, this is what the problem is. Okay, well, here, let me tell you how to solve that problem. But to be honest, I don't know if that really is what your problem is.
Yeah.
That like the misidentification of what's going on here is very, very, very common. So
Yeah.
that's one of those things that I think a clinic is ideal at solving. So anyway, I interrupted you there. You were going to say
No,
something.
I agree. And I think this is something that it's hard to figure out the right way to go about fixing it because yeah, I tell people the good thing about horse trainers is you don't need a certification to do it. There's no government qualification to say he's qualified to be a horse trainer. And I think that's a good thing. It's also a bad thing because anybody can hang out their shingle and go, I are. Last week I couldn't spell horse trainer, now I are one. And somebody will come to them and pay them money, and so it's both a blessing and a curse. And so I'm trying to figure out how to kind of help that because there's always people that say they're a horse trainer, and some of them know. Some of them are actually selling people a bill of goods and they know that they're fleecing people and they're actually doing, and then other people are just ignorant. They just don't know that they don't know any better, that what they're giving people is information that's not credible. I think most of the people that I learned from when I was growing up or when I was just starting getting into horses, they weren't trying to lead me down the wrong path. They were just giving me the best information that they had, which wasn't very good information. And then when I got into some, I was, went to Bucks and I went to a few other guys. Then I started watching one trainer and I was like, you're fleecing people. You are telling people the wrong thing to keep them coming back. And I don't like that. I think you're more of a snake oil salesman than a clinician. And then there's other people that they would just tell it like it is. Hey, you can, if it helps you, great. If it doesn't, no hard feelings. And so I think it's tough to try to figure out how to police our industry and figure out how to help the trainers that are really doing a good job get better and the trainers that aren't doing such a good job kind of maybe pull the sheet back from or pull the curtain back to a little bit and let people see the stuff. And I think podcasts are, they're a good way to like let people figure out the difference maybe or I've talked about a couple guys that I'm friends with. We've all talked about maybe doing a deal where you get some really good clinicians and you watch the up and coming ones or the guys that maybe apply and you say, I think he's on a Colt starting level, he's a 7, and in a reining level, he's a 5, and in a this, he's a 2. And then you kind of have a governing board or, that's a little bit of a nonpartisan deal. Say, hey, I've watched him. I know how he operates. That guy's pretty decent. He's trustworthy. And this is where his skill level is. And then this guy, yeah, he's he gives the rest of us a bad name. So
Yeah.
I think sometime in the near future, the technology is gonna kind of start catching up there, and I think we're gonna see a little bit of that, and hopefully it'll do the industry some good.
That is, I seem to be talking about this a lot lately, and I just say like on a personal level, that's one of the most disheartening parts of this whole journey for me. I was at a
Mhm.
particular expo, and I was doing the MCing, and there was a clinician there that I had heard of and had been compared to a fair bit, but I'd never actually met him and never, well, I might have met him, but I'd never seen him ride a horse yet. And then he
Mhm.
comes to the expo and he's riding his horse, and I'm like, this guy's a high level amateur, but I
Yeah.
mean, he's not. If y'all are watching me ride a horse and then you watch him ride a horse and you think the same thing is going on, that scares the hell out of me because we're not in the same universe. And that was the when I realized the crowd didn't know the difference.
Yeah.
That was so now I'm kind of on this journey. I've been talking about like the horseman's horseman, and to me, I've always thought Martin Black is kind of the epitome of that because if you watch Martin ride a horse, Martin's not the most, he doesn't have the verbal pitter patter that a lot of
Right.
other have, the smooth talking stuff. But if you're of a certain level and you watch him ride, you realize how good he is. If you're not of a certain level and you watch him ride, then he probably just looks like a guy that's out there not doing much,
Yeah.
and so so how do we solve that? How do we get the crowd to
Um,
understand who does know what the hell they're doing and who might not?
yep. Yep. So I'll give you two examples. The first one is I think we educate people and inspire people. And most of the clinicians that I look up to don't do enough inspiring. Like, so I watched Buck and I watched Martin Black and I watched Peter Campbell and I watched a bunch of other guys and they wouldn't show off. You didn't see them drop their bridle and ride around bridleless. But I knew enough to see what they were doing, and I was like, man, that guy is good. Like that guy's doing some stuff that I don't know how he's doing it. It's like
Mm-hmm.
magic. And he didn't say, hey, now I'm going to do, you know, lead changes down the center, Tempe lead changes down the center line, and my horse's head won't come up. It's like he didn't say that. He just did it, and then he just went off like it was no big deal and did some stuff. And you would watch his hand, and his hand didn't move, and his horse would stop and roll back, and he wasn't picking up on the rein, and so and then you would watch somebody else that did a lot of hey, now I'm going to do X and now I'm going to do Y. And their horsemanship wasn't nearly as good, but they were bragging about it and showing off and dropped the bridle and did this. And so it was like trying to find the balance between the two. And that's probably what I'm trying to work on, is being able to say, look, this is what you could do with your horse. I want to show you something that I hope inspires you to work harder to get to this level. Because if I don't show you, you're not gonna put the work in to get to the next level. And then at the same time, give people enough homework and enough meat and potatoes that you're just not trying to sell your newest DVD video. It's like, look, it's not all show. It needs to be meat and potatoes, and this is how you do it. And then I think most of the clinicians are erring on one side or the other. You've got the guys that are, I tell people, with a couple notable exceptions, most people that I've seen that everybody knows about, they're more like TV evangelists. They're trying to they're in it for the money, not not so much for you know the guy that's cooking at the soup kitchen now. He's actually doing the work, and it's like, so you're trying to find the balance between the two. And I think so. That was my guess. That was be my deal. My other thing, you were talking about, when they didn't know the difference between what you were doing and what this other guy were doing. So one of the things I do when I'm doing a clinic is I say, okay, I want you to all think about the best horse person you know. And I said, get a mental picture of them in your mind. And they go, okay. I said, now I want you to think of the worst horse person you know. And I want you to get a picture of them in your mind. And they go, okay. I said, I want you to put both those pictures on the desk. And I want you to tell somebody that doesn't know anything about horses to go get you one picture. And they're both riding the same color horse and have the same kind of clothes on. How do you tell them the difference? And a lot of times they're like, I don't know. And I said, you're right. The difference between the best person you know and the worst rider you know is 90% the same. They're on top of a horse, leg on both sides, rein in each hand. The difference is 1,000 little tiny details that you have to be really observant to watch. Because the kid that just learned how to ride and the person doing Grand Prix dressage or cow working or reining, most of it looks the same. And so there's not, to the untrained eye, most of it looks the same. And so I think trying to just get people to understand, I said, look, when you're coming to the clinic, I'm not going to tell you one thing and it's going to change your life. I'm going to tell you the next thing you need to know. I'm going to say the next biggest part that you need to fix is this particular spot. And then when you fix that, then the next particular spot's this spot. And then the next particular spot's this spot. I can't tell you one thing that's going to take you from a 4 to a 7. Like I can take you to a 4 to a 5, and once you get to 5, I can teach you to a 6. But if you don't know how to post, I can't tell you to post on the direct diagonal because you don't know what the diagonal is, and you couldn't post if you were there. So like you gotta figure out the rhythm of the post. Okay, now you can post. Okay, now you can understand that you can post on one diagonal or the other. Now I can help you with that, and now I can tell you the next thing and the next thing. But I think that's something that that we don't really understand is there's a lot of difference between, the difference between the best horseman we know and the worst isn't any one particular thing. It's thousands of little tiny things. And most of the time we don't even notice them. And the problem I think is the people that are good at marketing have told people a bill of goods. Oh, now I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and maybe I'll tell on myself. So I was doing a Colt training competition in Tennessee. It was at the Southwestern Horse Expo, and it was the second day, and they had 3 different round pins, and they would tell you were mic'd up, and they would tell you, hey, we're coming to you. And then they would ask you a question. And so there was 2 announcers on the floor of the arena, and then the announcer in the stand. And so they kind of kept the crowd entertained and interacting and stuff. And so I'm riding this horse, and it's my second day. And this thing, I settle him up, I move him around a little bit, I climb on him, and I can feel that he wants to lay down. Like he sniffs the ground, he kind of arcs his back a little bit. I can tell I don't want him to lay down. So I bump him forward, and I'm starting to trot around. And the guy on the ground says, hey, we're coming to you in a minute. Sure enough, 30 seconds later, they go, "So, Mark, what are you thinking about your Colt?" And this thing wants to lay down, and I'm having to kick him to get him to go. So I'm trotting around there. I go, "Oh, we're doing pretty good. I'm, just thinking about teaching this one to lay down here. I've been learning from Dan James, and of course, the announcer and the two guys on the ground think Mark is telling a joke. Like there is no way that he's going to teach his horse to lay down. That's not going to happen. And anyway, I came to the middle and let my rein down, and he sniffed the ground and laid down. Like, I mean, I gave him about 30 seconds of preview that what I was doing was going to get him to lay down, and then this thing lays down. And I mean, like, it's one of those things that, you know, it wasn't that I was that good of a trainer. The horse was going to do something, and I could tell it, and I just called it before it happened. And like, if you had asked most people in the arena, they would have said that Mark, he is one amazing. I mean, I saw that guy at a colt start and teach that thing to lay down the second day under saddle, like, and then get back up and trot off like nothing was, and it was one of those things that it's a little bit about showmanship, and I think
Mhm.
we kind of need to be able to be aware of when they're kind of when it's way more showmanship than horsemanship,
Mhm.
and there's definitely some skill there, but sometimes it's like, hey, I'll straight up tell you, there's no way.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought
not
that
gonna.
was gonna lay down. That thing was gonna lay down whether I wanted him to or not. So
I like
so
that.
it's trying to educate the public, I think, into being able to discern when they're being kind of misdirected, or it's more showmanship than actual horsemanship, and when they're actually being fed good meat and potatoes information.
Mark, we talked a lot about colt starting, and we've kind of gotten into some different trainers and so forth. And one of the things I would like to talk about with you is we kind of within the industry we tend to have people separated in that you have kind of young horse guys, and then you have more finished horse guys. And I say we separate them in the industry. I mean, it really almost separates itself because um, the young horse guys don't tend to do a lot of finished horse stuff, and the finished horse guys don't tend to do a lot of young horse stuff. I well remember watching a finished horse, kind of a guy that went to start a colt. I was watching it. It like really almost got to be okay, just stop,
Yeah.
exit the round pen. I'm gonna get in there and it got pretty bad. So what are some thoughts that you have on that? Would you agree with that, or have you known some guys that you
Yes.
think are as handy on either end of the spectrum, or what?
I've seen a few, but very few. Like I think I can count on, one or two hands the amount of people I know that could show one as well as they can start one. So that's really a rarity. I think some of them, I think some, it's what we do most of. I think a lot of guys, I think most of the people that when they when they get to the more advanced they get, and the more, the advanced part of the horsemanship, the polish that they're doing on those horses. I think the more they do it, the more they do that, the less they remember about starting one and doing this and that. And so they just get out of practice at it. And so pretty soon they kind of forget how to start one. And then I think the same thing, those guys that are starting one, they get pretty good at starting them, and they don't know how to finish them. And I think I can tell you, I'm not nearly as good at finishing one as I am starting one, because I do more starting than finishing. And I would say, as it's probably more important, what I tell the interns and people that come to me for help. If you're going to start colts, keep try to have one or two that you have that you're continuing on with. Because if all you're doing is starting colts, you're never going to get good at finishing them because you've never done it. So do that. And I think it's really good. You have guys that just get on, and I think one of the reasons why I have been successful in the colt starting thing is because I have finished some, and I get to the point where I can get them to kind of start stopping and turning around nicely and carrying their head well, And not all of the horses do it, but you're going to have you're probably going to have 2 or 3 out of 10 that are Einstein. Like they're really good. And if you're a colt starter that has never finished one, you're not going to recognize when the really good ones get there because you've never like, oh, this was easier. This is easier than the other one. No, he's not easier. He's way better. Like, and if you could, so though I think when I start colts for the reiners and the cow horses and those guys and the jumpers too, they all have 2 or 3 out of 10 that are really like people are like they they wonder where you put their horse. Like this isn't the horse that gave you 3 days ago. Like this isn't the horse we. I mean, I don't know what you did with my horse, but that's not him. And it's really magical. And then the rest of them, they're going to be like, that's really good. All the rest of them, they're like, oh, all of them are really good except for those three. Those three, we think you somehow switched horses with us because there's no way that could happen. And so I think when you're starting colts, if you learn how to get your skills better at the advance, it'll help you differentiate between a colt that's just pretty good and a colt that's exceptional, and you'll be able to bring out those skills way better, and that makes you more valuable to the trainer. And then nobody wants to be a colt starter for their whole life because it's hard on your body, and so learning how to just sound a bad one and also make the good ones into a little bit better, bring out that talent faster, really kind of makes you more valuable to the customer. So I would say that. And then I think the guys that are already to that point, don't do something don't do something that you're not good at. Like if you're not good at colt starting, you need to be able to tell the difference between a good colt starter and not, and then let them do their job. Don't and this is something for my internship program. A list of I have a list of topics or a list of skills, and one of them is farrieing, and colt starting is another one. Vet work is another one. Anyway, I tell people, look, in order to be in the horse industry, you have to have a basic level of competency in all of these areas. So the basic competency level in farrieing is to be able to look at the job that the farrier did and say that was worth the money I paid him. Like you need to know it looks pretty balanced, it looks pretty level, everything looks symmetrical, the nail holes are pretty good. You need to be able to know if you need to be able to differentiate between a good job and a bad job when they did it. And then that's the minimum. And now it's handy if you know how to tack a shoe on, but it's not required. If you know how to tack a shoe on, it's handy. And the same thing with starting colts. You need to be able to watch somebody start a colt and go, that guy knows what he's doing or that guy doesn't. And if you can start a colt, it's also handy for you, but it's not necessary. And so if that's not something you want to put the time and effort into being good at, just figure out who does it good and hire them. And then, yeah, if it's not something that it's in your wheelhouse, don't do it. Just find somebody else to do it because it's way better if you just do what you're good at and let those guys that are good colt starters
Yeah.
do what they're good at.
I don't think that everybody appreciates how big of a range of difference there can be there. Like if you have a really good farrier, that's art. I mean, there's if you have to tell your farrier how they're supposed to do their job, then either you need to get off the internet and
Yeah.
keep your mouth shut, or you need to get another farrier.
Yeah.
They should know way more about what's going on down there than
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
Kind of the same with the others. You mentioned
Yeah.
a second ago about colt starting being hard on your body, and one of the other things I'd like to talk with you about is that because we also kind of have a wave of people that now think it's cruel or inhumane to start horses as 2-year-olds, and I will certainly allow that not all 2-year-olds are the same. There are definitely some 2-year-olds that are not physically mature enough to, that we need to wait another 6 months on that one, sort of
Right.
a thing. But my thought on that has always been, I for sure know that it is harder on me to start a 3 year old or a 4 year old than a 2 year old. And if I'm going to be a guy that starts a few thousand of these things in my life, my quality of life and physical health is going to be way different if I started 3,000 4 year olds than if I started 3,000 2 year olds. Those 4 year olds are going to beat you to a pulp by the time it's
Yeah.
all said and done. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? Like, I mean, we want to do what's good for the horse, but we kind of got to do what's good for us too, right?
Yeah. So what I tell people is it's not as much what you do as how you do it. And so what I tell people, and I tell this in my clinic a lot, I say, look, abusing a child and disciplining a child is the same action. It's an adult with a stick beating a kid. Like, that's what it is. It's an adult got a stick and he's whacking some kid's butt. And that could be abuse or it could be discipline. It depends on how it's done. It could be with love and sorry, son, you're not supposed to do this, and to keep you from hitting all the neighbor kids, we're gonna have to give you a little discipline. Or it could be, it could be abusive. And it's the same thing with the horses. I see both sides, and what I tell people is, look, I think that I did a video a few months ago, and it was when to start your horse. And I said, look, I'm going to tell you my view. I think you we know that horses don't physically mature till they're 4, 5, 6, and we also know that humans don't mature until they're 18, 19, 20. But we still let them do some physical exercise before they're 18, 19, 20. And we also know that sitting them on the couch until they're 20 is probably not good for their for their health. Also, we also know that putting 12-year-olds in a coal mine for 8 hours probably isn't good for their health. So, like, we don't expect the 12-year-old to do a full day's work, but maybe a few chores wouldn't be a bad, wouldn't be too detrimental to him. And so the same thing is like, look, if you're going to start a 2-year-old, I start a bunch of 2-year-olds for this ranch, and they'll put a week or two on them, and then they kick them up for 6 months, and they bring them back in, put 2 or 3 weeks on them, and then kick them back out for the rest of the year. And then I come the next year, and man, they're 3 and 4-year-olds in there. They're big and strong, and man, they already know, you can catch them, put a saddle on them, and they might, just kind of crow hop a time or two, just kind of, feeling fresh. And then you step on them and you can trot and lope across the pasture, and hey, they're ready to go. And so it's they're way more moldable and directable physically and mentally when they're a little bit younger, and less likely to try to hurt you. And then also, they've got a little bit of work ethic. And so I tell people, look, when I was growing up, I had a paper out when I was about 13, and when I was carrying papers, I carried the same amount of weight that a mailman carried, but I only carried it for an hour. And halfway through the paper route, I had half the papers gone. So now it was way less. So I mean, I only carried the weight that a mailman carried for like about 10 minutes, and then I was down to a quarter, and then it was down to a third. So look, don't get your 2-year-old and say, now we're going to, by golly, get him started, and we're going to ride him an hour a day, and we're going to lope 40 circles. And yes, that's probably not going to be very good for him. Also, giving him an indication that, hey, a little bit of work is required for your feed and all your medical care that we're giving you isn't bad either. So I like starting them as 2-year-olds, either giving them a good start a couple weeks and then kicking them out for a month or two and then bringing them back in periodically, or what a lot of the breeding facilities and the reining and the cow horse guys, they will do the fillies one day and the colts the next. So they'll do all the fillies on Monday, colts on Tuesday, fillies on Wednesday, and they'll alternate back and forth. They'll give them a day off in between, and they don't ride much. I mean, they ride them 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then they're done. So they may lope 1 or 2 circles each direction. They trot and they move the hip over and they do a little side passing and they, work on backing.
There you are. Okay, we lost you in there.
Oh, sorry.
You got to, that's okay. It's an internet thing. It happens. You got to the part of work on backing and I lost you there. So,
Yep.
So,
So yeah, we get them so that they're, doing a little bit of, they're just practicing a few of the maneuvers, a little backing, a little side passing, a little pivoting around or whatever. And they just get just kindergarten. We In kindergarten there's a lot of recess and not very much education, but they still go to school and they still learn a little structure and they go, hey, this isn't bad. And then, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, we start having less and oh, there you're back.
okay. So you
Did I lose
were,
you again?
yeah, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, we start having less and less. I'm assuming recess and a little more intensity in the
Yeah,
classroom. And yeah,
yeah,
see, that
yeah.
sounds perfectly reasonable to me. One of the things, like we were talking about the personality characteristics of Colt starters and all of that, it's part of that not emotional. If you got the person with a chip on their shoulder and an ego, and this Colt's a little tough, well, they might say, well, I need to ride you 3 hours, and that's where, to me, the emotional stuff can become a problem. They're not being protective with that horse anymore. They're going to show him or make
Yeah,
him or whatever, rather than being protective of him. So
yeah,
everything can be done with common sense, right?
yeah. They want to dominate instead of educate, and so they'll try to tire that horse out instead of just allowing him to kind of just soak, get it a little bit better and soak on it.
If you were to just give a few tips of advice to the typical owner out there that may be having problems with their horses, what would be some of the big overreaching sort of tips that you would give?
Oh man.
That's not articulately asked, but I think you have an idea of what I'm trying to get at there.
Yeah, yeah. I would say try to think through the problem more logically than emotionally. Just say, hey, what part is the horse not getting, or what? For me, I don't really teach very many maneuvers as much as I teach principles. And so when somebody comes to me with a problem, I go, okay. And so normally it's he won't do X or he does X when I don't want him to do it. And then I say, well, why is he doing it? And they'll go, what do you mean? And I go, well, he either doesn't understand or he is really scared, or he doesn't want to, or he's physically incapable. It's the same reasons that humans don't do something I ask you to do. You either didn't understand what I wanted you to do, or you didn't want to, or you thought you were going to die when you did it, or you're physically incapable of doing it. So and then we figure out what reason they think the horse, is not doing it, and we kind of go from there. But yeah, just trying to problem solve. I think that's something that, you know, we have kind of gotten away from in schools is, we educate, or maybe educate's the wrong answer, maybe indoctrinate, or we ask the kid to regurgitate information instead of saying, hey, I'm going to give you some information, now I want you to formulate a plan on how to solve this problem. We just say, remember that, Spain was conquered in this date, and so we just kind of go, hey, this is the information I want you to regurgitate for the test, instead of how does that information impact your life, and how can you use that in the future to use that for your betterment. And so I think just trying to problem solve that horse, that's what I do, is to say, hey, well, let's see what's happening. And then, like I say, sometimes that horse doesn't trailer load, or he doesn't back up, or he doesn't side pass, or he doesn't, and so for me, when that happens, I go, well, does he, if he doesn't trailer load, well, does he lead? Lead him in there. Oh, he doesn't lead when he goes in there, or send him in there. Does he send in there? Oh, and so I start kind of breaking it down and trying to get, problem solve and find the root cause of why it's happening, and then say, okay, well, let's fix that, and then we'll go on. And so that, I would say, that's getting that problem solving thing. Learn how to problem solve. Yeah, I would say learn how to problem solve.
I'm honestly not sure where you're gonna fall on this one. I think we're in line with a whole lot of stuff, but there's a little bit of a potential conflict of the way you've said a couple of things here. So I'm just
Mhm.
searching for clarity here.
Yeah.
But one of the problems I see in the industry as I'm kind of seeing this stuff of consent and all of that stuff coming up, there seems to be a movement that stressing a horse is a bad thing and we should be doing everything we can do to not ever get one stressed. I don't know if you've heard of it. Like now we have this term of threshold and staying
Yep.
below threshold and all of this stuff. And I don't know if it is the semantics issue with me or what, but I fundamentally disagree with that premise. I think
Yep.
stressing a horse and teaching them how to handle stress is one of the absolute most foundational things we can do when we're starting one. And it's the difference between one that we would say is broke and one that's still green. The broke horse can handle when you're ponying that colt and he tries to climb up in the saddle with you. Some horses are fixing to head for Mexico and
Leaves
some are
out.
going to be there
Yep.
with you, right? And they can. The difference is one can handle the stress and one can't. So
Yep.
where do you fall on that? Is that a
I
semantics issue
I am
or
nope. No, I am the same way. So here's what I tell people. I used to be very, very conservative, and I've softened my conservative opinions maybe a little bit, but I still do things pretty conservative. I tell people, look, I think that making sure my horse can handle stressful situations and stress in general is something that I need to be able to make sure he can do. If you don't want to do that, I'm not going to tell you you have to, but also your horse might buck you off and leave you when stress happens, and that's going to be hey, these are I'm telling you the consequences. Like if you don't teach your kid how to have a good work ethic and he ends up living in your basement till he's 50, that's consequences that you have made. We were talking and goes back to that colt starting thing. I had a flag and I'm working the horse with the flag and they said, well, he's kind of scared. I said, yeah, 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 he's a little worried. I wanted to see what's going to happen. I'm not trying to scare him, but if he got scared, I don't mind. Like I'm not going to take the flag away just because he's a little worried. I want to see what happens when he's a little worried. And if he listens to the halter rope when he's a little worried, then I feel like I can probably climb on him and be okay because even if he got a little worried about seeing me up there, he'd still listen to the halter rope and we could survive the situation. And I said the problem is if you never if you never allow him to be stressed, then you never know what he's going to react like when he does get a little worried. And so anyway, and there's a bunch of mom, and I don't know how it is at your clinics, but in my clinics, there's mostly ladies there. There's very few guys in the clinic. And so I said, do you teach your kids about sex and drugs? And they go, well, yeah. I said, why? Do you want them to do it? And they said, well, no, but we know that they're going to be introduced to it. And I said, the same thing. Yes, I don't run my horse to be stressed, but I know it's going to happen. So it's up to me to say, hey, I need to introduce you to this thing that's probably going to happen in your life. And I would be lax if I didn't help you figure out how to handle that situation. And anyway, it's one of those things that I think, like I say, we as humans have got to the point where we've made a civilization that doesn't have a lot of stress in it. Like our stress threshold has gotten way low with all the technology advancements that we got, and frankly, it's no, I don't know if it's that good for society. And so now we think we can do it in the horse, and it's like, well, you can if you're in artificial situations, but in real life, and you know, I use my horses in real life. Like my horses are out. Tell a little story. I was in a clinic in Austin, and Austin's a little bit liberal, and they were talking. We were talking around horses, and anyway, I told the story about hey, you figure out where you want your horse to operate and all, but I like mine at about a 7. And so anyway, one of the ladies said, hey, I think you're too hard on your horses. I think you should let them, you're too strict. You're too. And I said, oh, well, not that I really cared, but appreciate you being,
mm-hmm.
appreciate your input. And so the next day we had clinic again. We're going along, and one of they wanted to work on loping. So I said, well, we're going to stay on this side of the arena, and I want you guys to lope, just one at a time. Go down there and lope a few circles, and we'll work on some loping and this and that. And well, one of the ladies, the girl, she was a younger girl. She was loping around there, and her saddle was loose, and it slipped underneath the horse. And she was fine, but the horse went. I mean, you know how it goes. It bronking around there and honking, and so anyway, hold on a second. So I'm going along there, and this lady, she, like I say, she rolls her saddle underneath, and so this horse starts bucking around, and so I kind of head, we're on this side. I said, everybody follow me. We're gonna head in and follow this horse around. And the best place to be in a wreck is following it, because if you're in an arena, it's eventually going to find you. So tracking in behind it's the best place to be. So as it comes around there, I head towards it, and everybody else goes into a little group and stands there in the middle of the arena like, wide-eyed. And so anyway, this thing makes a circle, and then it gets down to the end, and it looks back and it sees that group of horses, and it comes for them like it's lined up, and so it's lined up across this thing, and I think this thing's not going to go well. So I've got a
Bowling for
horse, and he's
horses.
yes, exactly, exactly. We are going to have a strike here. And so I've got a cow horse. My horse does cow horse stuff, and we start Colt, and so he knows the deal. So I say, hey, you get that one. So we cut across the arena, cut across the middle, and we kind of take this thing about his shoulder, and we push him off the line, and we push him down to the fence. And then when we get to the fence, I cow horse turn him, and I reach down there and grab his bridle, and then we kind of, now he's going the opposite direction I am, so we do a little circle, yin yang kind of thing, until he settles down. And so he settles down, everything's good, and we get the saddle off and put back on. She gets back on. We do a few circles and this and that. And so anyway, at the end of the clinic, I said, hey, we were talking about my horse and being strict with him. And she said, yeah. And I said, I will tell you that I'm more strict with my horse than you are with yours. And I said, I can tell you why. I said, the problem is my job is to keep you guys safe. And in that moment, my horse, if he was a human, would have said, look, buddy, you told all those people what to do and they decided not to do it. Why don't we let them have a little bit of reality, and they can deal with their own? Because frankly, I don't want to put myself in a position where I could get hurt to help those people that didn't do what you told them to do in the first place. But he didn't say that. He said, yes, sir. And we met that thing in his shoulder and pushed him off to the side. And because he said, yes, sir, we will do whatever it is you need me to do at the moment, we kept all of you guys aboard. And nobody got bucked off. And I said, and so, like, I'm not going to tell you you have to be, you can be as strict as you want with your horse in your perspective. But there's people, and there's horses and dogs that we enjoy having for companionship, and there's horses and dogs that we use for jobs. And how many of you, if you were looking for a seeing eye dog for your grandmother, would go buy one that said, he probably won't kill your grandmother. He only led one out of four into a bus. I mean, he probably's not going to get her killed. It's like, look, when our life depends on it, now it's a little bit different. And so I think, like I say, there's stress that's going to happen, and we need to be able to say, hey, when when I need you to perform, our horses are a little bit, they have the same IQ as a 2-year-old. So you're not going to let your 2-year-old do
Yeah,
things that are going to endanger their life. And so, my job is to keep him safe. And so I think the same thing happens with our horses. We need to be able to, we're stewards of them, and we need to be the best stewards we can, be the best parents that we can for them.
I have my personal demo horse. He's getting old now. He's kind of semi-retired. I don't use him all the time. I just pull him out when I have a need for him. But he is a coward deep down in his heart. He is just chicken hearted sort of horse. He's cow bred and out of certain bloodlines that were kind of known for that. But I have a pretty darn good relationship with him, and I have used him for things like we were trying to pin some cows one time, and we had a mama cow that just got on the fight. And to the
Mm-hmm.
point, when they're like a hornet's nest, like if you came within
Yeah.
30 feet of her, she was
Yeah.
coming at
Right.
you.
Right.
And we had 5 people trying to drive her. And we have one old man that about gets his leg broke from her butting up against him and about threw him out of the saddle and all. And so I said, y'all just hang back and let me deal with her. And so I basically went over there and I did like a bullfighting horse with him. And when she would come to fight, I'd side pass him away. And she basically tried to attack me right through the gate into the pens. I just used him for bait.
Yep.
And that's
Yeah.
about as far out of his comfort zone as he could possibly be. But he
Yeah.
didn't get hurt and we got the job
Yeah.
done. And if he wasn't obedient to me, we never would have been able to pull that kind of stuff
Yeah.
off. So I
Yeah.
100% agree with you. And there definitely are still people out there that use horses for work and need them to stand up. I'll also say you talked a little bit about people on there. I have 2 young sons. They're getting older, but one is in the 6th grade and one is a high school senior. And on that scale, I would say I'm a pretty strict dad. I'm not scared to yell at them or whip their butts if they need it or whatever.
Right.
But they also were both raised on a horse ranch with lots of problem horses and colts. And if they don't listen to me, they might die. I mean, if they're
Yeah.
heading to the wrong direction, about to crawl in this with
Yep.
the wrong horse or whatever, like when I say no, you better stop
Means
in
no.
your tracks. So yeah,
Yeah.
so there's some context to all of that stuff, I guess.
Yeah. I think the problem is sometimes we don't, and I think now, like I say, it's more artificial. I think the world's gotten a little bit more artificial. Somebody was, you were talking about your boys in there. They've got lots of they've got lots of freedom because they are obedient. Um, my dog, he hasn't been on a leash for a long time because he's pretty obedient. And we were talking, this was not this dog, but the dog I had before, same thing. Anyway, he's sitting on the back of my truck, and I've got a little shade there, and there's a little pad that he lays on, and so he's back there. And anyway, I would just tell him to go load up, and he'd go jump in the back of the truck there. And so anyway, we were talking about, you know, the same thing you're talking about, having some structure and expecting him to obey and this and that. And I said, that dog, he hasn't had a leash on in like 3 years. Like the last time I put a leash on him was was we went to a place that had a leash rule. You had to be on a leash. And so I put a leash on him. And he looked at me like he was appalled. Like, what are you doing? What kind of what you know because he not used to that. I mean, he didn't. I said, look at all the freedom he's got. He hasn't had a leash on in years. Why? Because if I tell him to go lay down, if I was calling him, I did this for a little demo. Because we were talking about it. I called him. I said, come here, and he comes running. And I mean, he's a ways away, so he's running pretty hard. And I go, hey, down, lay down, and he just hits the ground and lays down. And I said, see, I can stop him. I said, if he was coming running to me and he had to cross a road and there were cars coming, I could tell him down. He'd down. Like I can save his life there. And the reason he can have so much freedom is because he listens. And so, yeah, it's like say those horses, they can have a lot of freedom and a lot of freedom when they listen. And when they don't listen, then we can't give them as much freedom.
We talk a lot about the horse trusting us, but the horse has to be trustworthy as well, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Tell a little story since you brought up the cur dogs. And this man, I learned a couple years ago, he has since passed away, but there were some people I was helping pen some cattle. It was in a spillway with a dam. We're in Louisiana. We get lots of water and flooding and that kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
so kind of the deal is you can keep your cattle in this area, but if the Mississippi rises, this is going to be a lake in about a day and a half. So you have to
Yep.
be, it's not necessarily safe. So we're pinning cattle to get out of there. And of course, it's been raining. It was so muddy. We were going down the levee. We had to have a big tractor with the trailer hooked to it because we were rutting the top of the levee as we were. I mean, it was bad. And the pens were already underwater. So we had panels on the side of a levee, and that's where we're trying to pin the cattle and load out. And we had gotten about half of them loaded out, and then one cow decided to challenge the panels and knock the whole side down, and they're loose. And once you've pinned them and you've already been doing that, repinning them again 5 minutes later is not going to be the easiest
Yeah.
thing to do.
Yeah.
So the man that owned the cow says, "I know a guy with some good dogs. I'm going to call him." And I have worked a lot of deals with dogs, and I'm a fan of like border collies and kelpies, but he had said cur dogs, and I have seen a lot of train wrecks with cur dogs because most
Yeah.
of the time they're not trained; they're just kind of thrown out there and they do their natural thing, and it goes how it goes.
Yeah.
And this man shows up with a 30-foot stock trailer full of dogs. He must have had 30 dogs with him. And
Yeah.
he's got 3 shot collars. And I'm going, well, he might have 3 dogs under control, but 27 are not going to be. I'm just fully expecting this to be an absolute train wreck.
Yeah.
And he said, and by the way, what they called cur dogs, he has got. It looks like he went to the pound and he said, "I'll take every dog you've got." Like there's a one that
Right.
looks like a German Shepherd and one that's probably a half poodle, and it was just every mix of mongrel you could imagine.
Yeah.
And he gets on one of the horses and he goes out there and he sends his dogs in and he's got his remote and everything, and he let them bark and kind of pack up bay the cattle for about 5 minutes. And that man one time said, "Get behind," which was his command for them to get behind the
Yeah.
horses.
Yeah.
Every dog immediately came right to him and got behind his horse. I'm like, that's the damnedest thing I have ever seen. I mean, he actually has every single one of these dogs super
Yeah.
trained.
Listen.
And he
Yeah.
did that. He sent them in there about 3 or 4 times and packed those cattle up and got the cattle where they were respecting the dogs,
Yeah.
called them back, and they came straight to him when he called. And then he looked at the man and he said, "Okay, where you want them?" And he went and pinned them right back up. The whole thing took maybe 45 minutes. And
Yep.
I mean, with every guy on a horse in the parish, we couldn't have pinned those cattle in 45 minutes like that. So
Right.
anyway, you just made me think of that little story.
Yep. Yep. When those animals are obedient, man, there's amazing. We're the we're the no, and they're the that horse has got some gifts that God gave him that I like. They're strong and they're fast and they're athletic and they can run faster and smell better and see better. But God gave me the brains. And so I'm supposed to be the one that makes the decisions and he's supposed to be the one that help. I mean, hey, this is the way, for me, it's I use my tools and the things God gave me, my gifts to the best of my ability, and then they've got to use the gifts that God gave them to the best of theirs, and part of that's leaving the thinking to us
Yes,
and
sir.
just doing what they need to do.
Well, the last thing I'll ask you about may be sort of the more controversial topic, and hopefully we've built a little rapport. And if you don't want to go here with me, then that's perfectly fine. But you kind of alluded to earlier that there are some horses out there that we're not going to get fixed. And that
Yep.
is kind of one of my pet peeves within the industry is you do have a bunch of clinicians that act like there's nothing they can't fix, nothing they can't do. It's all just
Yep.
if you love them enough and you spend enough time with them, then you're going to get there. And,
Yep.
I know that unfortunately not to be true. I don't think
Yep.
there's a ton of them that we're not going to fix, but you're always going to have a little group of
Yep.
them like that. So
Yep.
you agree? You've seen some of those yourself?
So what I tell people is, I tell people there's ones that I'm not going to risk my life to fix. Like I'm not saying somebody couldn't fix it, but he couldn't fix it for you. Like, like I've seen some horses that were pretty bad go on to be like Guy, I had one that he was pretty bad, pretty rank, but they put 3 times as much money as he was worth into him, and eventually gave him to somebody else that works a feedlot with him. And so it's like, is he fixed? No, he still will block off most riders. But there's a cowboy there that's pretty forked, and he will stick on him, and they have a go around about once a week, and he's got that job, and you already spent $15,000 on him, so, and then gave him away. So yeah, is he fixed? Well, that's debatable. But I tell people there's a lot of horses that it's a relationship. You have to figure out, is that drug addict thing, like, yeah, is he fixable? No. Depends what you call fixable. Are you willing to take the drug addict thing on, and maybe not. And so, yeah, there's a lot of horses that are too much horse for that person, or the attitude, that horse doesn't really want to be trained, and he'd rather be a little bit of a hooligan, and a little bit of a problem maker. And if that's what you want, well, by golly, you got it. And most people don't want that. And so I tell people, look, could he be fixed? No, I'm not going to fix him. Like, I'm not going to work with him anymore. It's not worth me risking my life to do that. And I think it's going to be, you're going to spend way more money than you could have just, you're going to spend 3 times as much as he was worth. So, but so yeah, I totally agree. There's a lot of horses out there that people spend more money than they're worth, just to, and sometimes it's the trainer won't tell them. Hey, they won't be honest with them. They'll say, yeah, just a few more months, just a few more months. He's coming along, and then it never happens, and they're just looking for the paycheck. And so yeah, there's definitely some horses. I was talking to somebody the other day. They were talking about, you were talking about the Mustangs. Mine thing is a little bit of the rescues. I mean, there's some good horses in rescues, and there's some also ones that aren't very good. And the lady, she got one from a rescue, and she's like, oh, he had a bad deal. It's like, he might be a little rougher than what you want. You might need to get something different. She goes, oh, I just feel so bad. And I said, are you single? She said, yes. I said, well, why don't you go look for a husband at the penitentiary? I'm sure there's some good ones there. I mean, not all of them. I mean, there's probably some that are innocent, and there's probably quite a few of them that are, would have repented and said, hey, I don't want to do that anymore. I said, but that's not probably a really good place to go pick a husband. Same with horses. We need to find horses that work for us, and definitely some good ones anywhere, but have a realistic expectation.
I think that's very sound advice. You have your risk and reward ratio
Yeah,
to pick up right there. And I
yeah,
definitely have seen some of those horses that are kind of like, can you fix him? Well, I can fix him for me, but I
yeah,
can't fix him for you. I've got
yeah,
several in the pasture like that are, I can ride them, but I don't
yeah.
know that I would put them out there for anybody else. Mark, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. I have enjoyed talking with you. We're also going to have in the show notes, we'll have links to your stuff. You've got a website and a YouTube channel that I know you've been putting more and more effort into doing regular videos, and I've watched several of them. There was one I was going to ask you about, but I did not have the
Yeah.
foresight to write it down, and I can't remember what the topic was that I wanted to bring up. But I really like. I should tell you, it's editable. If you give me a second, I'm going to pull it up
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'll ask you about it. Experience doesn't equal skill. So
Oh yeah.
I think we touched on that a little bit, but just to give people a taste of what you're talking about on your YouTube channel, would you kind of revamp sort of that? Like,
Yeah.
you talked about the good thing about the horse training industry is you don't have to have a certification to be in it. And the bad thing is you don't have to have a certification to be in it. And
Right.
I think I'm going to love what you're about to say. So go right ahead.
Yeah. So So I do one on Fridays called Friday Philosophy, and then I do on Tuesdays as kind of a Tuesday tip, and that one's I try to pick something for the Friday Philosophy that's just a balance, and so I one of my you hear things as a clinician, and you're just like, oh, that makes me. You'll hear a phrase, and it'll make you think better or worse of a person just by what they utter that phrase, and sometimes it's true, and sometimes it's not, but one of the phrases that I've heard was, I've been riding horses since I was a kid, or I've been riding horses since before I was born because my mother was pregnant with me and she was riding a horse. And I'm thinking, like, that makes you a better horseman because you were, uh, some your mother carried you when you were 6 months old. Like, that doesn't, like, you think that is impressing me. You, you, you're not, you're not, you're not impressing me much. And so my goal with that was, look, we know lots of people that are 50 and they still drive like crap. So just because you've been driving a lot doesn't just because you've been driving for 40 years doesn't mean you're any good at it. I mean, I know some people that have been cooking for 20 years and they still cook like not very good. So like just because you've been doing it a long time doesn't mean you're any good at it. And also on the other side of that coin is, look, if you're going to be a good horseback rider, you have to have some time doing it. You're not going to be a good horseback rider if you've only been doing it for 20 minutes. Like you have to have some time spent in the saddle to be good at something. And so, it's a balance there, but don't use, well, I've been doing it for a long time to indicate the fact that your skill is advanced because you haven't died yet
Mhm.
doing what. So yeah, that was kind of a funny thing that we were talking about. And I always like to do something that's a little bit controversial and then helps people think about it. And yeah, that was kind of a funny one. It's like, look, you know, just because you've been doing it all your whole life doesn't mean you're any good at it. I mean,
For sure.
it could be, but it isn't. But yeah, that was something that if I hear somebody say, "Oh, I've been writing since I was 2," that normally doesn't inspire confidence in me. So I've heard it. I've heard it normally it comes out of somebody's mouth that I normally go, "Oh my goodness." So it was just a little tip to, if you're trying to impress the horse trainer, don't say that.
I would
Yeah.
certainly agree. If got a college class I'm going to speak to here in I think next week, and I try to do once a year at least do a deal with a college class of future horsemen and women.
Uh-huh.
One of the things that I try to tell them is stuff you're going to learn in the classroom's important and it's good, but you need to be handling horses as much as you possibly can, because when you go for a job interview, probably they're going to hand you a horse and they're going to know in about 10 seconds whether you know what you're doing or not, whether they can turn their back on you or you have to be babysat, and there's no hiding that. Like if they're actually any good at what they're doing, they're going to know really, really quick where you're at. And so the same
Yeah.
applies to people at clinics. If you're pretty experienced and you come to a clinic, believe me when I tell you, you don't have to tell me that. I'm gonna sniff that out real fast. If you're not, I'm gonna sniff that out real fast. So
I was doing some clinics. We used to do clinics. A friend of mine, we were doing clinics together, and so we would have people come in the clinic, and we were trying to separate them, the people that were on the more advanced side and people on the less advanced side. So all the people that were a little less experienced were wanted to work on more basic stuff. We'd put them on one side of the arena, and the people that were a little bit more advanced, we'd put them on the other side of the arena, and they'd work on more advanced stuff. And so we'd split up the class, and so I would take one, and then they would take the other one. Then in the lunchtime, a lot of times we'd split. And so they were walking. A bunch of people were walking in, and I'd say, "Okay, you're on that side. You're on the other side. You're on the left side. You're on the right side." And they came in, and we had them fairly equally split by the time the last person got in there. And I said, "Which side do you want?" And, "Yeah, I'll take this one." "Oh, okay." So I went on their side, and so I said, "Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us what you want to work on." And so anyway, we started working on my little group started working on one, and so somebody asked me, "Well, why did you split the group up?" I said, "Well, we put the more advanced people, on that side, and people that want to work on the more basic stuff on this side. And I remember a couple of the people said, "Well, how did you know?" I said, "Well, when you walked in the arena, you told me." And they're like, "Well, we didn't say anything." I said, "Well, I could tell." And they were like, "Really? How like?" And it was like spot on. And they're like, "How'd you know?" I said, "Well, by the way you walked, the tack you had on your horse, how you walked your horse in. I mean, like
Yeah. It was a billboard
there's
effect.
not there's not one specific thing. There's like 10 things that you did on the way in that I said that person is on this side or that person's on the other side." And so it's the same thing. It's like you don't have to tell somebody you're good at something. If you're a framer, all you have to do is hand somebody a hammer and say, "Pound that nail in." They don't even have to get to the second swing and you're already like just
Yeah,
starting it. You're already going, "Yep, you know what you're doing," or "No, you don't." And so, yeah,
absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, Mark, it has been fun. I hope we meet up and get to ride together somewhere down the road. I
yeah,
have a feeling I'd have a blast starting about 10 or 15 Colts with you one day or for a week
yeah,
or
man.
something like that. So,
Yeah, I'll love it if you got extra time, or I'll have to figure out where you're at and put you on the map. And then when I'm swinging through, if I have a few days, I'll swing by and hang out. I loved our time together, and it'd be fun to hang out and swap stories and swap ideas. And man, I tell you what, that's one of the best things about me traveling around is I get to hang out with a bunch of really cool horsemen, and we just bounce ideas off each other. And hey, what do you think about this? And let me see how you do that. And oh, it's so much fun.
yeah, absolutely. I don't know about you. What I tend to tell the public is the stuff I was figuring out 3 or 4 years ago, but the stuff
Yeah,
that I'm playing with right now, I tend to kind of keep them, and I might bounce it
yeah,
off of other horsemen I respect, but
yep,
I don't open my mouth about it in public for a good while typically. So it's always, and when you get to a certain level, there's a smaller group of people that you can do that with.
yep,
So I always
yep.
appreciate finding a new one. So anyway,
You bet.
well, thank you, man. I do appreciate you coming on. Best of luck to you. And like I say, we'll have links to all of your YouTube channel and Facebook stuff and website and all in the show notes. So y'all
You bet.
check out
Thanks.
Mark.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you much. We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.